This week, Bryson Bort, the founder and CEO of GRIMM, is here to talk a little bit about his background and the recently released product, Crossbow, which I know you're like, oh my God, it's a product placement on Paul Security Weekly. It's really not. It's really something you want to pay attention to because it solves problems that I guarantee many of our listeners have had in the past and even have probably to this day. We have another sponsored technical segment. Sven from Netsparker will return. I don't think you were here last time Larry was here.
I wasn't.
Sven is the total web app ninja. And my brain struggles to keep up with Sven.
Awesome.
Because it's awesome.
And that picture looks so photoshopped. But
Yeah,
it's weird.
it is.
It's weird.
A woman targeted with 120 images of a certain kind on public transportation and how it was so-called hacked, right? An unpatchable flaw in modern cars that is somewhat underwhelming. Attackers backdoor another software update mechanism. Chrome extensions become compromised. That seems to be all the rage these days. Flash is dying a slow death, but not a complete death. We'll talk about that. Somebody really hates HBO. Like, there is a group out there that really hates HBO. We're going to talk about that. Some hacking back, some Rowhammer.
USB, less secure than we thought.
If that's even possible.
It is.
All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Brought to you by Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. The SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings. Netsparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. Netsparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man that after some studio upgrades can now put his PP works on his D-Snake. Paul Asadorian.
That is so relevant to what we do here and so inside baseball that no one has any idea. Well, regular listeners probably do.
Yep.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 526. It is, in fact, Thursday, August 17th. I am excited to be here, as always, as for every show that we do now here on the Security Weekly Network. This is just one of 6 shows, actually, that we're doing today. You should tune into all of them. You can find out more, securityweekly.com/subscribe. Make sure you go do that. And but this show is going to be very special, as always, because one reason, and it's perhaps the most shining reason of being special, is that Larry Pesce is sitting here next to me.
I thought it was just because I had gas, but
well, I mean that comes with the
territory.
Comes with the territory. It's part of.
Right. I like this new sticker you've got on the. Is that the new Chromebook?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is there's some smeg over here. I messed up a sticker. It's like when you put the iHack charity sticker on your laptop. Yep. if the stickiness overlapped with one of my Security Weekly stickers and it ripped off the face of one of them. So I had to remove that sticker. But yeah, I got the thanks to Max, who's in studio, for the tool sticker. This is a work in progress. Obviously, there's a lot of real estate here.
Yep.
So I had.
I like the vinyl I Hack Charities one. Really
Thank
nice.
you.
I have one on the door of my truck covering a scratch.
Nice. There you go. Kind of interesting though. We could do like an entire show on our own personal technology and how we get by. So I had the Samsung Chromebook Plus, which is the ARM processor, and these are Chromebooks that have the flippy thing and the stylus. That and then I upgraded to the Samsung Pro, which is the black one that has an Intel M3 processor. And still does the flip thing, excuse me, in the stylus. This is still running Chrome OS, but the reason that released the stickers is, like, I had gotten the stickers and the other one is silver, on my silver one, to a point where I was almost happy, and then I upgraded, and the other one's going to a new employee, and it's all stickered up for her.
Good, perfect.
Perfect, stickered up. So yeah, it's a work in progress on this one. I had to start all over with stickers. On the lines via Skype, Mr. Joff Dyer is here with us. Joff, welcome to the show.
G'day, Paul. Good to be here again.
Good to have
Lovely
you.
Thursday evening. Yeah.
Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us as well. Jeff, and your spirit animal has joined us this evening.
Yes, we are both here in spirit.
Yes, very nice, very nice. Quick announcement, itpro.tv/Security Weekly. Discount code is SW30. It gets you 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription, and it allows your manager, because your company's going to go buy a subscription, right? This is just how it's going to work. Your company's going to buy a subscription to IT Pro TV. Your manager's going to help manage your training. They're going to assign modules to you. They're going to keep track of your progress. They're going to give you all kinds of time at work. Well, maybe not all kinds, but they're going to allot time for you at work to do your training, because they can see how little or how much training that you're doing on the job, which I feel is extremely important for really any job, especially in security, as we always have things we need to learn and keep up on. So I think it's a fantastic thing, itpro.tv/Security Weekly, to learn more.
Brilliant.
Let's jump right into our feature interview for this evening. Bryson Bort is here with us. He is the founder and CEO of GRIMM. Prior to GRIMM, Bryson led an elite research and development team division that directly contributed towards national security. Bryson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you, Bryson. It's nice to have you here. I want to first start, Bryson, with how you got your start in information security.
Well, I think I got my start the way a lot of us did. When I was a kid, I tore things apart that I wasn't supposed to and got yelled at a lot for it. Pretty much anytime anything broke, it was my fault, whether or not I'd already fixed it. And I just continued to take that passion up through school and did computer science and just continued education. And when I got an opportunity with the Army to go into tactical communications, which half of that was not just doing fun things in the field, but the other half was, 20 years ago when you ran around with the gold disc, solving and fixing every patch manually by touching each machine. So it kind of leads us to today.
So, Bryson, were you enlisted did you go enlist in the U.S. Army, or did you work as a contractor, or how did that all come about?
Or was it that you were on the bad side and they said go to the Army or go to prison?
All right, Larry. So I haven't been faced with jail like you have. All right,
wow.
I'm always there to help bail you out at midnight.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly say I was faced with it, Bryson. Sorry.
We all got to do what we got to do to get by.
Hey, absolutely.
No, actually, Sabre and Tarbucket right here behind me. I went to West Point. So when you graduate West Point, you're automatically commissioned as an officer.
Yes, sir.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. You had some experience working for the Army and DoD. At some point, you decided to start your own company. So tell us how GRIMM got started.
Well, as you can identify with, there were a handful of alcoholic drinks involved. I wasn't happy in the last job that I had, and I wanted to do something else, and I didn't know what. So I went out to a group of friends, and I just canvassed and said, hey, I want to do something else. I'm not sure what. Any ideas? And somebody eventually said, why don't you start your own company? And that's risky. I mean, that's not for me. But more importantly, at that time, I didn't have an idea that I was passionate about, that I believed in, because I don't think that you should start a company to make money, which probably sounds odd, but for me, I knew that when you start a company, you're going to have that honeymoon phase, and at some point, you're going to wake up at the nadir of that honeymoon and go and look to the left of you and go, "Oh my goodness, what am I doing?" And it requires a belief in something that's going to get you out of bed, and it takes that belief to be able to honestly lead a team of folks so that they will follow you and they would want to be a part of that. And so it was literally a few months of kind of having background processes thinking about that. And I was on a flight to Texas, had a few cocktails, and on a cocktail napkin, I just started sketching out an idea for a different kind of sensor framework, and that's what sparked the idea for GRIMM.
That's awesome. So tell me about GRIMM in the early days. At DEF CON, you had your release party for the crossbow product, but obviously GRIMM's been around for quite some time. So as much as you want to share about what GRIMM's been doing in those years.
Sure. So GRIMM's been around for 5 years, and probably the biggest change is that in the beginning it was just me with 40 voices in my head, and now there's 40 or 50 engineers, and I'm pretty sure they're not figments of my imagination. So, so far, so good.
That's awesome.
And
there's three of them behind you right now.
Supporters of the security conferences between providing training. We supported 2 classes this year at Black Hat. We've been a part of the car hacking and the industrial control systems villages since the beginning. In fact, I want to give a shout out there to Tom Van Norman, who's been very kind to us over the years in helping us. Probably our first public debut of anything was with Tom's help. So imagine RSA 2015. And if you've ever been to RSA, it is the largest, glitziest event that I've ever seen. And I mean, they have 2-story booths where you can walk up and have meetings at the top because they build these structures. And so our tiny little company at that time, we had a lot of guts and a lot of ideas, but not a lot of money. So we couldn't afford to do anything at RSA, but the ICS wall was there at the Innovation Sandbox.
Yes.
And so we brought our 3PO automotive hacking lab exhibit, and that's where we have an entire 2012 Ford Focus, and it's the entire electrical skeleton of the car minus the mechanical components, and it allows you to interact, and it demonstrates elements of car hacking, and it also provides a flying test lab for research. And if you can imagine what this thing looked like at the time, it was just a large piece of plywood. We hadn't even painted it. There's wires going out every single direction. And we hadn't planned on this lab even being able to support itself. So we leaned it against the ICS wall at the Innovation Sandbox at RSA. So it was the complete opposite of, I think, everything that was happening at that conference.
I seem to remember that particular device being referred to as the Ford on a board.
Yes.
Which is brilliant.
So wait, and I know there's a lot of people probably wondering this. How did you acquire the components to be able to do that? Did you have an agreement with Ford? Like that's my burning question. Bryson's laughing. You can't see me; he's on another camera. But Bryson's like as soon as I asked that question, he just broke out into laughter. If you think I'm going to tell you that, you're absolutely insane. Paul.
I think I know the answer to that, but I want
his wife's or his mother's.
But I want to hear Bryson's answer. But I know an answer to that.
Okay.
So this is live, right? We're not bleeping out the insert car manufacturer name, right?
Nope.
No, they did not condone that. So again, like I said, we had a lot of passion, but what we didn't have is any money. So Matt Carpenter and I schemed for a budget that would pretty much not get you anywhere in this country on an airplane ticket, and that plus junkyard diving at 6 junkyards got us the Ford on a board put together.
That's awesome. That's a great story.
That's called buy the automobile for salvage for a couple $100 if you can get it for that as cheap as possible minus the airbag, and you deconstruct it and then you sell the scrap back to them. Yes, that's how you do it. Or you get a rental car. I mean, no, don't get a rental car.
No.
No, don't.
No, Paul. So GRIMM's been doing a lot of projects like that, and we do those because it helps advance the state of the art, as well as it provides an opportunity for the community to come and interact with different exhibits for folks who've never hacked cars. Our Howdy Neighbor smart IoT house, which has pretty much every device you can imagine in it. And all of these have to go through what we call the spouse test, which means if you've never programmed before, let alone ever hacked, or have any interest in doing something that's a different platform or a different approach than you might have experienced before, you can come up and go through some examples and be able to demonstrate basic level hacks and start to get oriented to the system. And then, of course, go take the red pill and can go even further down the rabbit hole. And all of that represents, we do hardware, firmware, and software vulnerability research and assessments from anywhere from small companies all the way up to the top Fortune.
And that was really the foundation for GRIMM, correct? And still largely is to this day, Bryson? Just so people can get an image of what GRIMM is as a company.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so but then at some point, you were like, people have security problems above and beyond the hardware, firmware, industrial control systems, and vehicle security, and you wanted to address one of those problems. Like, how did this come about when we're going to talk about the Crossbow product, but you, I think, had some really, in my opinion, had really great insight into probably one of the top problems that we struggle with as a consumer of security products. Like, how did that all come about and stem from kind of this, what I feel like is shrouded in secrecy, hardware, ICS, industrial control systems, security and hacking company, and you were like, well, people all have this problem, we're going to go solve it for them.
Well, like the best ideas, it wasn't even our own. We had a Fortune 50 company that heard about our reputation, and you know who they are. And they made themselves famous one day through a security compromise. And as a result, they, like a lot of companies, they got all the budget they could possibly want. And they staffed up, and they've got some really great folks, and they purchased just about every defensive product that was available on the market, and they improved. And what they found was that all of these defensive products and all the things they were doing, they were getting really good at the tools and the exercises, but they weren't necessarily improving at where were they actually with respect to their cybersecurity posture. And so they came to us and they said, hey, we need something custom. We need something that works across our international enterprise footprint, all the way from the endpoints that clients are interacting with at our stores to the enterprise backend and our supply chain. And could you build something like that? We're like, yeah, we could absolutely do that. And then, being the halfway intelligent individual that I am, I'd read about these before, and that sounded like one of those things called a product. So I went back to them and I said, can we have the intellectual property? And I, being new to this, was expecting some sort of pushback, and they're like, yeah, because from their perspective, the more folks that use this, the more that this contributes. It's a safer environment for everyone, as well as we could build a stronger and more sophisticated platform that solves a lot of the issues that are out there.
That's a smart customer.
And so basically they basically charged you with creating a tool that allowed them to test their complete security architecture. Is that true, or is that more kind of encompassing than what you set out to do?
They had some initial goals for scalability and particular items. And so we co-developed those requirements with them. And then we decided that on top of that, we saw where there was this gap in the market, because it wasn't something we've been paying attention to. We weren't a product company. We were an elite services company. We were doing a lot of work with all sorts of different elements, from helping international companies create their own cryptocurrencies to your traditional high-end mobile and web application penetration testing and improvement. And it didn't occur to us that there was this gap in the market that nobody was able to continuously assess and get a true understanding of what was the risk exposure that they had from cybersecurity.
It's really fascinating. Bryson and I have already talked about this product, and it's more fascinating. The more we talk about it, Bryson, the more fascinated I am with how it came to be and what it can actually do. On our other show, Enterprise Security Weekly, we talk about all of the enterprise security solutions, and one of the pain points is always, how do I test them? And I think a lot of people have their own test methodology, but it only kind of like incorporates certain elements. So what do you do in the Crossbow product that would allow myself, if I had an enterprise and I wanted to make sure my solutions were working properly, like what does Crossbow do to help me test those solutions?
Sure. I think I would start by contrasting what's there. So I think there are a lot of phenomenal penetration testing tools, and the world does not need another penetration testing tool. And there's too many to list, but they are really good. They are mature products. Some of them have their own conferences, and there are a lot of great technical folks who know how to use those. But the challenge with penetration testing tools is that they don't scale well. And a lot of them are focused more on the latest exploit that's been there and attempting to replicate that, and then using that to see, does this exploit this configuration? Does this exploit this system or group of subsystems? And that doesn't necessarily emulate the threat that's out there or the way an adversary, of course, being a lot of different types of folks, would attack an enterprise. And what Crossbow does is it allows the end client to run it themselves on a SaaS platform or on-premise and emulate any threat campaign they want at scale in less than a minute, and then do that repeatedly. And that's the big difference, is that the core code continually has these modules of communications, on-box capabilities, deployment methodologies, and then the techniques, tactics, and procedures that an adversary would employ in an environment. And so you can continually, just like Legos, where you have that little green board, put on the Legos that you want, and then try a different campaign and put on different Legos, and then put on different Legos. And as a result, over time, you run this spectrum of being able to test without having to spend the amount of, right now, the way that you would do this is red teams spend a lot of time and effort on building each one of those campaigns. And with this, it's all right there, and the Legos just keep coming together. And then the way that we allow it so that you could run the same campaign over a period of time, and each time it looks different, is not only is it different down at the binary level with the way it's packed, so the signatures are different, we also provide a gray network so that the command and control is continually shifting and it looks different each time.
I just want our listeners to reflect on that, because when Bryson first told me, I was highly skeptical. I'm still highly skeptical. It's only because I've spent time with Bryson and we have mutual friends that I believe what Bryson is saying. So I want to turn it over, not to Larry, because you know Bryson before, but Joff or Jeff, to just kind of grasp what we're talking about here, and how cool this is for organizations to have access to this level. Joff, I don't know if I'm kind of putting you on the spot, right? But you do penetration tests for a living, right? I mean, this is one of the goals of penetration testing, and this is putting it in the hands of the enterprise or really any defender. Do you have questions for Bryson up to this point?
Yeah, first of all, that was a really big statement you just made. So I'm sort of absorbing that. I think one of the challenges that penetration testing companies have is certainly how to emulate real threats when the pen testing company, like ourselves, are scaling up to do red team-like activities, and to be able to automate some of that is scaring me, because it would be like talking about putting us out of business. But I think it's hard to put words around. I think it's really, really interesting work that you're doing. I don't know that I have a question. Maybe I'll pitch it to Jeff for a question.
And when Jeff is done, I've got some comments.
Jeff, comments, questions?
Well, my initial question was going to be, and it's sort of been confirmed in what Joff was saying. My initial question was, are you really saying you're trying to put pen testing in the hands of the customer? Which I think the answer is yes. But I guess my larger question was going to be, do you see your product ultimately being in the hands of the customer, who I would question if they would have any idea what to do with the tool? What kind of training and what kind of background do they need to be approached the tool? To me, it seems more like it would be a tool to put in the hands of somebody like Joff or Larry at some point to tailor or streamline or offer a specialized service that is probably cheaper, more affordable to a larger community, larger market. Because the automation necessarily implies you're not spending so many dollars on man hours. But I'm old school. I'm a firm believer in manual pen testing over automated pen testing to begin with, but with the acknowledgement that there's certainly utility in automation in many ways.
That does beg a question, actually, if you don't mind me interjecting, and that is, I sort of got the sense, as Jeff was talking there, and as you've introduced your product ideas to us as high level as it is, but I got the sense that perhaps your customer base is probably skewed towards the high end, very capable with internal pen test teams that can sort of take it and run with it. I wonder if you have a comment over sort of who you are targeting. Per what Jeff was asking, whether it's the end customer versus the pen test companies or all the above.
Yeah, so to address directly, I don't see this as automating penetration testing. I suppose you could argue there's an overlap because the term penetration testing has such a broad spectrum of meaning. But what we see is that penetration testing is a quality control and a configuration check of endpoints of an enterprise or of a server in an enterprise. Whereas what this is looking at is that the majority of your surface area is the employees in that company. And all of those employees do their daily jobs and their operations, which is the reason that the most common approach to a threat to an enterprise is going to be email. And so 90 to 95% of attacks against companies come through email because that's the most common communication mechanism that supports business transactions and the way that folks do their work. And so a common scenario would be to set up a threat campaign, and let's pick one. Let's say a WannaCry, which was a common ransomware attack. And that ransomware affected a lot of different companies. And not arguing that it was deployed through email, but if it were, then I could easily send that email to everybody in my enterprise. So I would launch the campaign, and it would take less than a minute for me to be able to select the components that work the way WannaCry works. I'm not suggesting that the exploitation is there, which is where I think of more penetration testing is where I'm trying to exploit a computer. But I don't have to use exploitation to be able to have somebody go to an email and have that email pull down from a drive-by site or have them open up a Adobe PDF or something different like that. What I do need to do, though, is to make sure that the communications that replicate lateral movement or the command and control, because at the end of the day, none of these things work without that ability to do inter-zone communication. So that's where I want to be able to see things, because 0 days are always going to be there. There is always going to be 0 day. There's always going to be that kind of exploitation that gets you access into an endpoint or gets you access in. What's more important, so our hypothesis here is that it's more important to be able to see what is the posture of all of the people in my enterprise with respect to how easily do they do that? How do I train them and educate them naturally as a part of the way they do business versus trying to send them to classes or something which they're going to always ignore. All of those defensive products that I have in my enterprise to see things and to respond to things or to prevent things, what works and what doesn't work. Because as we all know, each of us as subject matter experts all have an opinion on what we think works or doesn't work, but there's no objective measure of that. And I would argue there never would be, because the only measure that matters is how is it subjectively implemented in my enterprise. And then the final piece is the IT security folks. So the security operations center or the managed security provider, how good are they? When did they see it? When should they have seen it? What did they see? How quickly did they respond? And how quickly did they remediate that? Now, you were talking about the challenge of putting that in a client's hands. The client that we would expect to use this could be all the way from a very sophisticated red team where we see them employing this and then integrating penetration testing techniques on top of it, as well as there's a software developer kit that we release with it. So there is the option for them to create some of their own custom modules to be able to take this even further. And that's where we plan on doing an integrated marketplace. But let's say that there's also the other end where you have the IT system administrator who is the one IT person in his company or her company, and they're required to do all of this, including the security. And of course, they're not trained on security. They know how to set up Active Directory and they know how to do Exchange. And now they, of course, have the security requirements on top of them. This is a very easy way for them to not have to worry about all the complex components of how does a campaign or the elements of a threat work. I don't have to understand Kali Linux. I don't have to understand all of the complex penetration testing techniques that make a lot of the members on this panel experts. Instead, what I need to do is just be able to emulate that threat because I know my domain, I know my emails, and that's all it takes to be able to launch this and get a result.
Larry.
So you know that's
hold on, Joe. Larry had a follow-up.
Larry's turn.
Yeah, so Bryson, I was going to put a whole bunch of words in your mouth, but I think you actually most of those words came out of your own mouth. And the big one was that I wanted to make sure that when we were talking about that there was a very much in my mind a distinction between a penetration test and some penetration test automation and red team activities and red team automation, and then even as a sort of a follow-on purple team and purple team automation, because not only are you testing your environment from a technical perspective, you're testing the reaction of your controls and the people that are monitoring those controls and how they can update those controls to catch all that stuff. So that's really brilliant, and the ability to put some of that activity into the hands of the user that's responsible for doing Active Directory, much like you would with something like Metasploit, and they can do that. Towards the end of that, I'm thinking about this more and more, and I'm like, you know what? This reminds me of what Core Impact was to penetration testing back in the day. Now Crossbow is like Core Impact of the red team, purple team sort of activity, or is starting to be that, and that's unbelievable to see. Joff, you had questions, comments?
Yeah, what I really like, I think that was being alluded to is the concept of getting some sort of qualitative metrics around the result, right? One of the things that we do at Black Hills is to we call them C2 pivots, but we do a testing where we're actually trying to give the customer a distinct measure of how effective their defenses are, without actually going through a phishing campaign, without having to go through a USB drop or whatever you want to call it, but. And I think you're alluding to the same thing with automation. Get real metrics to the customer that measures how their people are reacting, and I think that's a really important aspect. It was really good to hear.
And Bryson, I think one of the differentiators for me is, and I like your parallel to Core Impact and insight in that product. It's not about vulnerabilities and exploits. It's about what can I do if I test if someone is going to have the malware put on their system. What can I do from there? And how do I measure and test what defenses they've bypassed? That's a very different strategy from just testing if vulnerabilities and exploits are there. Because like you said, Bryson, there's always going to be a zero-day exploit somewhere. And how do I test my defenses without having an internal pen test team that may or may not have tools that really allow them to do so at any given time? And how do they be all-encompassing to, all of the attack vectors are out there? How do I continually test inside my network, what's going to do harm and how it's going to do harm, how it's going to take advantage of those exposures? And I really think that's what the heart of Crossbow is, correct?
Absolutely. And the best part about this is because it's automated, you can continually assess yourself. That's, to me, the huge sea change that's coming is where we saw, and Larry, I really appreciate the comparison to Core Impact. That's quite a compliment. But the huge change that I think is in the behavior of companies being able to do this continuously, because there is no incremental cost to doing it continuously. It is so easy to set up and repeatedly do. And if you think about that, this goes all the way back to the 1980s, where we were starting with configuration management and change management. If only we knew everything we had, and if only we could control everything we have. And if you look at a lot of the challenges with defense, we're still wrestling with that. And we probably will always continue wrestling with that because of the amount of cost it takes to do that, the amount of effort, the amount of process. And I know how much everybody loves process and policy and following through on them. And with this, you don't have to worry with that as much, because whatever those changes are that are going to continually happen in your enterprise, whether you've upgraded the email server or you decided to go with this network segmentation or whatever naturally happens that continues to have the enterprise match what it needs, you can see what those changes do to your security posture. You don't have to question it or think about it. You can see it. You can assess that, and you can do that continuously.
Bryson, I want to go back to Jeff's point about having knowledge if you're the internal security person and you have any varying degrees of knowledge about attacker methods. You know, let's say, for example, I've deployed malware, mock malware inside of my environment. I've given it a specific way to communicate. If I want to go change that, like, how much knowledge do I need? Like, if my talkback method is to tunnel over DNS and then my defenses have blocked that, like, do I need to know what, like, the next, like, greatest callback method is? Or, like, how much does your product automate that?
So that's all automated. When I talk about communication modules, we go all the way from the simplest, which is HTTP unencrypted, to HTTPS, which is common. DNS is another. We've also implemented some other ones as we started to get creative. So, for example, we use Twitter, for example. We do different kinds of steganography. And the other thing that's cool is that we've created dials so that you can sort of do easy, medium, and hard of it. For example, if I'm doing steganography, there's different complexities to the steganography, all the way from I embed my commands and data into the first or last bits of the image to I use algorithms that intersperse it throughout the image, and it's almost impossible to find. So very easily, the user doesn't have to understand steganography or anything to do with how it works, because it's an embedded communications module with that campaign. All they have to do is select it or select the level of complexity to it. And that's just a brief list of a lot of them. We have multiple other modules, and we're continuing to make more. And one of the fun things about where we're releasing the software development kits, and for companies like Black Hill that do this kind of work, that those sophisticated companies are going to create their own modules as they start to use something like this with clients. And we want them to be able to have that option to sell that on the marketplace for others to use. Or, of course, that will become part of a differentiator with how they would use the Crossbow platform.
Now, do you explore the exploitation method as well? I speak with a lot of endpoint detection and response companies, and they're all about, you know, the detection and the response aspect of it, but a lot of them are moving into the protection. Like, how does a system actually succumb to some kind of exploitation? Do you also test those exploitation methods, or do you just assume that an exploitation method is going to be successful?
So we do enough research that the Crossbow platform is going to be able to evade most antivirus products and endpoint detection, just the way the campaigns would. And then as a part of the marketplace, we're also rolling out specific neutered malware. So whereas you could simulate and replicate the WannaCry campaign, you could also use an actual sanitized WannaCry example out of the marketplace if you wanted to test with that specifically, for example. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, when I use your product, I'll phrase the question a different way. When I use your product, do I get to select the exploitation method, or am I just assuming that a user is going to execute my payload, and it's all about how the payload executes and how it communicates after the fact, or do you test the exploitation methods?
No, so we don't test the exploitation methods, and that's part of where I was distinguishing that from what I would consider more of the pure penetration testing approach.
Now, Bryson, you and I have chatted previously, and I asked you, I'm like, this all sounds really awesome and very similar to Core Impact, Larry. When we were doing that in the early days, they were one of the initial sponsors of this show. They're actually they bought the beer for episode 1. So I can tell you how far back we go with Core.
That was nearly 12 years ago.
Yeah, almost 12 years ago. So the concern with products like that, and I remember he was a mentor to a lot of us and still is to this day, Stephen Northcutt. And we were kind of concerned, like, if this got into the wrong hands, this would be really bad. Like, this sounds like something, Bryson, that I would go on, like, the dark web, like Silk Road or whatever that was in the news recently this week, and, like, buy as my exploitation kit. So what protections do you have to make sure this doesn't fall into the wrong hands? Because it sounds like a kit that I would go buy on the dark web.
Well, Paul, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to have this publicly recorded so that when the FBI comes knocking in a year, I've got my get-out-of-jail-free card established.
There you go.
I also appreciate the fact that Paul said dark web.
I did. So I'll work cyber into there somehow, too, in APT.
Yeah, so this is not something that's available to the average consumer. This is something that companies sign up for. Each campaign has a unique fingerprint. So if somebody tried to do something, that fingerprint is tied to that individual and to that company, and along with, of course, the contractual liability. The second part is that the command and control is hardwired in, which is both a protection mechanism from somebody trying to use this for illicit purposes, as well as it is also prevents your crossbow campaign from being hijacked by somebody else. I'm not going to call names, but I can think of another company that I've seen, and it looks like their approach to penetration testing and red teaming is lining you up exactly to have it hijacked. So they're almost a compromise in by using them. Additionally, besides the fact that the command and control is hardwired in, there are lots of safeguards with respect to the way that the domains and the limits are set. There are time limits built in. There's an automated kill switch that's built in so that you don't have to worry about this running amok in your enterprise. You have complete auditing and visibility. Every activity is captured. Every single node, every activity that is run on that node is captured in real time, all viewable through a common dashboard.
Nice.
So I have another question, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know, Bryson, if you're at all familiar with the PCI security standards.
I am.
Well, and we can try to fill in the audience as we go along. You know, which requirement or requirements would you be trying to sell your customers on? You know, using Crossbow will help you meet or help you fulfill requirement X.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I'm also trying to deal with my frozen screen.
Sure. I'm trying to get a feel for. I appreciated your follow-up description. You know, where you said it's not so much a pen testing tool; it does other things. So I'm trying to fit it into what PCI requirement would it satisfy? If I was a customer wanting to use your product, which PCI requirement or requirements would I be meeting with using Crossbow?
So I think that this is one of the challenges, is something like this doesn't have an exact analog in today's market, is that I think this matches the requirements for a company to, right now, where they say, hey, you need to have done a penetration test or a red team once or twice a year. That level of compliance, I think, is more than met by what Crossbow does and in a more effective manner.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, and part of that's because the requirement for pen testing is still, with clarification in version 3, somewhat open-ended. But when you were saying it does these other things, I started thinking, well, it sounds more like either a vulnerability management tool. When you were talking about it goes out and does configuration checking. It almost could be used. There's a requirement to do an annual. I think it's still annual. Incident response exercise. In terms of detection and how well does your network hold up to some sort of an attack. It almost would fit into that category, and it almost would fit into, and this is where you kind of have to sell the PCI community, not the end customer. In terms of detection and monitoring and how well do you respond, it almost ties into some of the requirements that are ordinarily met by SIM solutions.
Yeah, so in this case, you're able to simulate on the actual production environment. So instead of having to create a range or demonstrate how a smaller group of systems might fit in this because you're uncomfortable with opening this up to your live operational environment, this is meant to work there. And I think that's another area where there's a lot of savings in time and resource, and as well as the fact that simulations are not as good as the real thing. And this ensures that you are, in fact, working with the people and the systems and the product security that are, in fact, that environment.
Yeah, I think that's to me, that's one of the most appealing aspects. Is I've been having some conversations with an informal working group I've been a part of for a while that's looking into some of the specific scanning pen testing requirements and how to improve them and make them a little bit more relevant to, in 2017 for those companies that have to do PCI. And one of the ideas that I had a while ago was, pen testing should really be incorporated into the incident response testing. Instead of doing a tabletop exercise and have it be, some stupid paper pushing thing, have some sort of controlled exercise where you really actually, have a way of measuring not only your response, but your detection capabilities, which I think is huge.
GRIMM has, of course, sponsored our DEF CON interview series, which is almost ready to be published.
Mm-hmm. Which I didn't get to make it to because my damn flight was late.
Yeah.
I was supposed to.
There's some teaser videos out there. Hopefully, during this show, we'll run one of the teaser videos. They're awesome. We sat down with security experts, such as Matthew Carpenter, as Bryson mentioned, who also works for GRIMM, as well as Katie Mazuris and a host of other people talking about the future of security, essentially. Bryson, there's more questions. Some of them are answered in the interview series, and I'd hope to speak with you more about how people can test the hundreds and hundreds of vendors that are out there today that claim to provide security solutions. That's an interesting conversation, some of which might need to take place offline, but I have questions in those areas too. But in closing for this interview, I wanted to ask you Security Weekly's 5 questions. Bryson, are you ready?
I'm always ready.
Okay, that was question 0. That was question 0. Now 1 through 5.
I thought I had 4 more. Come on, man.
So, Bryson, 3 words to describe yourself.
3 words to describe myself. Passionate. Attempts to be humble. That doesn't count, right? That's a modifier of humble.
Yep. Fine. You're good.
And happy.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Lucky Charm.
A cereal.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Grimm.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second? Follow-on question, do you prefer to be in your bathing suit or not? Because pretty much the entire time I met you in Vegas, you were in your bathing suit, which is pretty hilarious.
I think you missed the chicken fights when I was throwing people in the pools too, but I prefer to go first.
Okay. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Oh. Huh.
Stumper.
It is a stumper. He was so good with the other. He was right there.
Stump the expert.
Paul Newman.
Like the lemonade guy.
The salad dressing guy.
Salad
Come
dressing.
on now.
He did lemonade too, didn't he?
He did.
Hey, he was the George Clooney of the charity component before that was like a smarmy thing to do.
Yeah.
And
he was also Cool Hand Luke and Butch Cassidy.
Angelina
Audrey Hepburn.
Oh, he went different direction.
Yeah, he did.
Very nice, very nice. Bryson Bort from GRIMM, thank you very much for appearing on this edition of Paul Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me.
And with that, we'll take a short break, come back, and we're going to bring on our friend Sven from Netsparker. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. A quick announcement. As we all know, attackers use domains and IP addresses in their attacks, whether it's to launch their attacks or collect command and control.
Or the Gray Network for Crossbow.
Yes, or the Gray Network for Crossbow. Targeted attacks will be interested in you, even if you're not interested in them. If you want to learn more, domaintools.com/Security Weekly. Kyle Wilhoit and Tim Helming will be giving an awesome webinar on Domain Tools Iris and all of the things that it can do to help you in your security program based on the world's largest and most comprehensive informational database on domain names and IP addresses. So make sure you check them out, domaintools.com/Security Weekly. Sven has joined us now from Netsparker, where Sven will be talking about bypassing input filters for web applications. Sven, welcome to the show. Welcome back, I should say.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, it's nice to have you. So you'll be talking about bypassing input filters for various web application vulnerabilities. I'm going to turn it over to you now to enlighten us. Strap on your seatbelts. Sven is caused us like a brain cramp last time Sven was on. Dude, you're awesome. I'm glad to have you back on the show.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to show today is basically filter bypassing for various vulnerabilities, for example, XSS or command injections, which are pretty common in routers, for example. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing with routers is that you often don't use languages you would normally use for creating web applications. Some are written in C, for example, or just other languages that are not really suitable. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you tend to make mistakes when you process user input, for example. So,
and Sven, are these commonly found in embedded devices? Is where I typically see a web application implemented in C or something like that, right?
Yeah, they are very common in there, I think. And I've personally seen a few of them and routers, for example. Mm-hmm. But you can also find them in like normal web applications. It all depends on what you're doing with it and how you approach the security in that case. So yeah, if it's okay, we'll share my screen now.
Sure.
I prepared a little presentation. So. Do you see it?
Buffering.
Spinning.
Buffering.
Hopefully Sven is on the machine. Yes, he is on the machine that lets him share a screen.
Why do you stop in the middle of having sex? Buffering. That's how they do it on. That's how they do it on the internet, right? Sorry.
Larry,
Jack's not even in the studio.
No. He's having his life alert buttons pushed.
So, I've called the presentation Bypassing Web Application Firewalls and Filters, or Why Blacklisting Doesn't Work.
That's awesome.
Okay, I think I can close this one.
I do like that title on the slide. That's awesome.
So I would say I would go so far as to say every kid knows how to bypass filters. And I will tell you why now.
I think it's every skid.
Either way.
Either way.
Yeah. So just think of the following scenario. The parents say, since last Thursday, our printer prints this weird character combination over every single page. I don't know where you learned this, but you are grounded.
He learned it from Security Weekly last week.
Yeah, that's right. Hacking printer segment on Security Weekly last week, Sven.
Maybe that could be. So there are certain rules the parents, of course, tell to the kid. You aren't allowed to turn on your TV, for example. Or you must not play on your computer, watch movies on your smartphone, or like call your friends. Now, the kid isn't dumb, of course. The kid will just connect his game console to the PC screen.
Yep.
Now, the TV is still off, of course, if he does that. Now, he also doesn't play on the computer, but on the console. So it's technically not on the computer, you know. And, of course, he will watch a TV show on the smartphone because TV shows are clearly not movies. He will also send a message to a friend to call him because he didn't call them, they called him. So I think the concept is pretty easy to understand. There's a set of rules you have. You aren't allowed to use certain keywords, for example, in web application firewalls. You aren't allowed to use some special chars, and you aren't allowed to use a keyword if it appears together with another keyword. For example, like iframe and JavaScript together if you talk about XSS. Now, apart from that, everything is allowed. So by default, everything is allowed. It's just if it doesn't break at least one of the rules that are, one of the rules. Now, for blacklist filters to be effective, you have to think of every malicious keyword character or keyword combination there is, which isn't easy, of course. You have to deobfuscate the input before you check it, otherwise you just won't get most of the dangerous keywords if they are obfuscated. And you have to keep it up to date because, for example, when we stay at XSS, you have different features there that are added constantly. You keep getting new event handlers, which we will talk about later. And all of that stuff. So it's not really easy to do that. Now, how likely is it to find a bypass? That strongly depends on the language and the available functions. If you have a complex language, like for example JavaScript, you have, for example, different property accessors. You can use the dot right here, or you can use the square brackets to access certain properties. Now, you also have many ways, like a ridiculous amount of ways to evaluate code in JavaScript. For example, with eval, set timeout, set interval, using function, script SRC, etc. So that's pretty easy to bypass if you have, for example, a filter for eval. Now, lots of predefined functions for obfuscation are also already there, for example, from char code, toString, B2A, etc. Now we will see that later as well. We also have error-tolerant languages, for example, HTML. And I would say the goal of HTML is basically that everybody who wants to can just use it to write, to make his own homepage, for example, or just any kind of page using HTML. And therefore, browsers fix malformed HTML, wrong encoding, missing quotes, and they are pretty, they are not very picky if it comes to spaces. So they accept various other characters instead of them. And lots of inline event handlers to avoid writing too much JavaScript, which is pretty handy for beginners if you just learn that language, and it also keeps the application tidy, and you don't have to write that much.
Sven, what do you mean by inline event handlers?
I will, if you want, I will answer that question a little bit later because I have a slide on them.
Sure. Awesome.
Or do you want to know it right now?
No, yeah. We'll wait for your slide.
Can't wait to find out.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. So browsers also have XSS filters, at least the good ones. We are not talking about Firefox here. They are not 100% secure, of course, like everything else. They can only protect against reflected XSS. If it's stored in most cases, the XSS filter just can't separate the valid content from an ejected content, and therefore if you have stored XSS, the filter is useless. So you shouldn't rely on the browser XSS filters. Also, I think in the last week or in the last 2 weeks, I saw about maybe 3 or 4 new bypasses for Chrome's XSS auditor, which is like a huge amount actually. But there are a lot of shortcomings the XSS auditor has that you can abuse actually. For example, in multi-line contexts, etc. Multi-injection contexts. And yeah, so you shouldn't rely on them. As I said, they only eject dangerous input they check input for dangerous HTML or JavaScript. And if the dangerous input is reflected to the page, they just block it. And yeah, they don't want to break poorly coded websites. They want to avoid false positives. That's why the XSS auditor also behaves differently depending on the input. For example, if you're on the website same-origin.com and you want to you have input containing script, SRC, HTTPS, other-origin.com, the auditor will block it. However, if you have HTTPS same-origin.com, it won't be blocked. So you can actually include some scripts as long as they are on the same domain, and it just will work. And they are also along harmless HTML tags if there are no dangerous attributes. For example, div tags are allowed, anchor tags are allowed as long as they don't have, for example, contain JavaScript as you can see that now. If they don't contain a JavaScript URI. Okay, now I will tell you the first and the most important rule of web application input filters. Just don't write your own web application input filters. Like that doesn't work, at least not the blacklist ones. And yeah, I will show you why now. Now we can talk about the event handlers. The first step, of course, if you want, for example, find a bypass for an XSS filter, is you have to find a way to execute JavaScript. And those are the event handlers I was talking about. Like you have onload, on error, on select, on wheel, on scroll, and the list goes on.
Right.
So, for example, if you have like the most well-known example, I would say, is the image src equals something invalid like X, and then you have on error, and then you can just pass a function that should be executed if the script didn't load. Now, almost every what?
On and on.
On and on.
On and on.
On and on, of course. Now, almost every browser has their own event handlers, which makes things a little bit more complicated. So you can't just block every event handler for Chrome, for example, and then hope that this also would work for Edge, for example. So that doesn't work. They have different event handlers. And some even depend on the device. On touch start, on device light, etc. Work on mobile phones, but won't work in your desktop browser. So this makes things a little bit more complicated for if you want to write your filter. Now, obfuscation is also a big problem with HTML. Like that would just execute alert 1. Now, to explain a little bit in detail, this is the SVG tag. If you write it in front of the script block, you can basically add random HTML comments in there. Like that would be one. You can use the slash, which would be a closing tag, and the question mark is, for example, for PHP or other languages, which is also same as a comment, exactly like this here. You can also use HTML entities In this case, if you use and #x, you can actually use hex encoding. So this would be opening parenthesis, and this would be a closing one. And yeah, you can also like break the JavaScript with entities. You can use the space in front of it, and yeah, you can also use URL encoding in there.
Sven, a long time ago, was it Jeremiah Grossman or was it Robert Hansen used to run a site that was like all of the different ways, and you could Arsnake used to run a site, and he stopped a long time ago. But what you've just shown is there other obfuscation methods that, because HTML is so forgiving, basically the possibilities are somewhat endless in as to how you can inject code into the user's browser.
I would say so. Not really endless. You have a few ways to do that. Mm-hmm. Not all of them are very well known. Mm-hmm. And the thing with Arsnake and generally the Overs XSS cheat sheet is the fact that there's a lot of old info. So you have some stuff that worked years ago. Mm-hmm. For example, JavaScript in image text would work, as far as I know. That doesn't work anymore. Mm. So you actually have to keep up to date. There's new features that are added constantly, as I said, and old features are just removed. So you have to really stay up to date if you enter that to be effective. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of stuff you can do. For example, you can use uncommon tags. You have map and area together, which is like a replacement for anchor tags. Or you can use the math tag and use that instead of the anchor tag. So as you see, the one above works in Chrome and the one below works in Firefox. So it's not always not everything works in every browser, as I said. Exactly. So the second step, if you want to bypass the filter, is you want to bypass filters for JavaScript functions. You can use Unicode, for example. This would be equal to alert1, the Unicode representation. Mm-hmm. You can use.
And so wait, so that Unicode bypasses the browser's filters for cross-site scripting?
Not the browser one. They are well aware of that, even though there are some mechanisms they just didn't think of. Mm-hmm. For example, with SVG, there's a lot of stuff that you can do wrong. Even the guys who do the XSS filter for Chrome, for example, screwed up a little bit there. So there were a few bypasses with that. And yeah, so that's basically a general way to approach them. But this specific trick here works only for other filters. For example, if you have a web application firewall.
Gotcha.
You can also use, instead of alert1, as you see here, you can use just L plus alert1 if you use it with a property accessor and window. You can use parent node if, for example, a document is blocked, which is pretty useful sometimes. And of course, code evaluation. As I said before, there is basically an endless way of possibilities to do that here in JavaScript. You can use JavaScript redirects. They don't work if you do it on the server side. For example, if you set a location header with JavaScript, that won't work. Browsers will block that. And you can't use it with meta refresh, for example. But actually, they still work in JavaScript, because I think the logic the browser vendors put behind that is that if you can execute JavaScript, you can also redirect to JavaScript URLs, and that wouldn't make much a difference. Now, that one is also quite good. For array, there you also have a filter function, and the constructor of the filter function is actually a function here. I don't know if I explained that correctly right there, but yeah. So this is equal to this here. And actually, you can just evaluate JavaScript code you put inside these parentheses. Then we also have set timeout, set interval eval. There are also the set intervals, especially not very well known, but with web application firewall vendors. I think I've seen a few that just don't care about that. It's basically the same as Evil, but this one will constantly execute this here, the code inside, and this will only do it once after a certain time. Now, the way more interesting part is what you would actually aim for every time when you try to bypass a filter, because it gives you just a way better opportunity to inject your JavaScript code. It's to move parts of the payload into location.hash. The reason for that is that you can access it with JavaScript, but it won't be sent to the server. So the web application firewall will never see this part here. And however, you use the first part of the payload to just get this here executed. Since this it's a little bit complicated, I will explain it in greater detail why it works. So how URLs a build is basically very convenient if you want to bypass a filter. I will tell you why. So we'll just switch to the point. I think that's a little bit better. First of all, we have in this payload svg onload equals and then our JS code. This is our first part. This will be executed by the browser, and we can execute everything what's written in yellow here. Exactly. So the document location is the URL. This is the whole part of the payload, including the hash and what follows. Now, unescape decodes it. The only encoding we have here is the %0a, which is equal to a new line. And now Evil will execute it as JavaScript. Now, HTTPS is seen as labeled by JavaScript. In other languages, you might be familiar with it because it's the same as goto, basically. And the slashes here, they open a JavaScript comment until the end of the line. Now, if you paid attention, we used unescape before, and this decoded this here into hash new line alert 1. So basically, the executed JavaScript code here is HTTPS or our label or goto. The rest of the line here, this is all a comment until we hit the new line here, and then we have a new line there. So it will be alert 1. So this is pretty convenient how URLs look like for JavaScript bypasses, actually.
So Sven, the WAF basically sees that as a comment, correct?
A go-to
Exactly.
with a comment, and then the comment terminates by the new line, which then results in JavaScript.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Oh man.
So yeah, you can basically see that if you just would change the part behind that here, it wouldn't make a new GET request. So the browser will never actually see the alert 1, and you can write everything what would be filtered otherwise by the firewall just behind the hash.
So would it be true to say that in that case, the x.com and all of that type of stuff is largely unneeded?
Yeah, kind of.
So
you still need the SVG part here to actually execute this, which will then again load all this stuff here. And yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Just making sure I understand.
Okay. If there are no questions, I will continue to the next slide.
Please do.
Okay. Now you can, as I said, there's also very often input filters for us command injections. There are a few common filters. For example, you don't allow spaces. After ping command, you just aren't allowed to use a space anymore, and that should fix everything, right? Because you can't break out of that and use another use another command or anything. Now in Bash, for example, we have here the brace expansion. Now this here would use uname. Then this comma here would be basically like a space and -a. So you don't even need to have spaces to execute that. What you also can do is using the internal field separator. This will basically tell Bash where to split strings in certain situations. And if we set it to comma, we don't need to use a space for that. We can use another comma instead of a space, and then execute this here with cat. This is actually needed, otherwise it wouldn't work. And then we can execute uname -a. We can also use IFS directly if you want. If we have the $sign, for example. So that would work as well, because this would be like a field separator and would, it would be the same as space, essentially. We can also use tabs. So if you, it's not only spaces that work here. Now, if you have forbidden keywords, you can also use other tricks. For example, you can break them up with quotes. You can use the subshell, or you can use the NSI quoting here. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And use just hex in there.
You know what's interesting, Sven? When I teach Linux to folks here in the studio, I give them like a list of like 8 or 9 or 10 commands that, when run, produce the same exact output. However, there's 10 commands that are different but produce the same output. That's essentially what you're defining here, which is kind of interesting. And my goal is to allow people learning Linux to understand that like all of the little syntax commands like matter, because not only will I give them 10 commands to do the same thing, I'll say 2 of those commands do completely different, like does not produce the results you want to desire, but 8 out of the 10 commands do. But that's essentially, in terms of like hacking, that's what you're defining here, is that there's so many ways to produce the same result that allows you to bypass filtering.
As they say here in the U.S., there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah. People hate...
I know.
Cat lovers hate that. I apologize to all our cat lovers who watch the show.
I know, and I love cats. The problem is the only
what
problem
is your highest cat count?
Well, no, the problem is I can never finish a whole one. That was not the direction Paul expected that to go.
No, because you've had, what, 12?
12.
12 cats at home.
We have 5 now. We have 5 now.
12.
You ate 7 of them.
Yeah, man, I was full afterwards. Oh, God. I had horrible gas.
And this is what Paul's worried about, offending his audience.
Yeah. See, I love cats. They can just never finish a whole one. Back to Sven.
Yeah, I see cats a very emotional topic right now. So I will just continue the presentation, and
we're gonna edit that part out. That part is going to be edited out of the show.
No,
I will try to not use the cat command.
Thank you, thank you, Sven.
Yeah, so you don't always have to use pipes or and or semicolon to execute new commands. You can just use a subshell like shown here. Now I want to actually show you a few bypasses.
Heck yeah.
Now I think I will zoom in a little bit. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So now when you approach such a filter, for example, here we have an HTML XSS filter. If you approach that, you could just go on and type in your usual payload script alert one script, for example. But that won't work here. Now you can you probably think script is probably blocked, and you're right. Now you try different tags. Iframe blocked as well. Now anchor tags they are also blocked. Now you can go on forever, and you can't even know if it's just if it's just a blacklist of a few tags, or if you have something like that that's blocked. So, for example, you just use random characters here, and then you. Oh yeah, we started with an A. That wasn't a good idea. So then you will see that this here is empty. So we can actually check here in the source code, and we see that this here worked. So we know that we have a blacklist of tags and don't just block everything that is an opening bracket and some character. Now you can try a few different ones, for example, style, and check if it actually checks if there's a closing tag or not. Style seems to work because we didn't get any indication that it didn't work, which would be like a blocked keyword error. In this case, at least. In other cases, it's a little bit more subtle. Either there's no output, or the output is stripped, or you just get our 500 of any error, for example. Not necessarily a 500, but other status codes. So for example, you try that and you find out that you can use style and you can use div, which on its own isn't very dangerous. And now you can try every single event handler, for example, on arrow, which wouldn't make sense in this context here, but you can try it anyway. It's blocked. So you can actually kind of automate it. You don't have to do that. You can use every single one of them, but I think it's easier to automate. Now you can end up with a very strange tag, for example, with on WebKit transition. And I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's a little bit complicated. You can check if that one is blocked, and it doesn't seem like that. Now the thing with WebKit on WebKit transition end is that you need a CSS transition for that. So it's not always straightforward. You just type in your command and it works. Sometimes you have to use other input forms or other languages, like in this case CSS. So yeah, we will make a class with the name X and the hover attribute. And then we use a transition, and let's say it's 5 seconds. And it should go to the color red. I hope I didn't make a typo here. Now, if you're not familiar with transitions and CSS, it's basically like that. I hope it worked. Hover me. Okay. Now, if you see, it slowly turns red. And that's basically a CSS transition.
Oh my god. It's like my cat walked on the keyboard. Is the code that you're entering, Sven?
Hey, you brought up cats.
Please don't mention cats.
Sorry. It is, though.
Yeah.
That's awesome, by the way.
So yeah, you just, it's, if you learn that stuff, it's like Chinese, basically. So
I agree. And you're very, yes.
I can barely remember the script alert one. I'm gonna have to add some. I'm gonna have to go back to the show and add a bunch of stuff to a document so I can copy pasta.
What I forgot to show you here, a few bypassers already prepared. If you want to take a look at that, maybe later, it's bypassers.pawn.me. And you can use this and take a look at, this is just a few of them. I think there are more event handlers you can use. I will zoom in a little bit.
Hold on. What is pawn.me? What is that your site, Sven?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can
bypass.pwned.me.
Yeah.
Bypasses.
Yeah.
Got it.
And this is not in no way exhaustive. There are way more bypasses that I didn't write in there, but it's just because it's so many you can...
There's more than what Sven has on that website, which is quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so next thing you might want probably do is on WebKit transition and then just type in your alert 1, right? That would be the logical thing to do because you want to alert. But I would try it with X first. So make the transition way shorter here. So yeah, the reason why I do this is because you don't know if there's alert blocked, if there's the parentheses are blocked. But if you do that, you see in the developer console that there's a lot of errors here.
Mm-hmm.
So this means basically that we already executed valid JavaScript. And I will hurry up now a little bit, so I will just use this here. 00, forgot that. And tell you that this here will most likely work. I hope. Great. Now we execute a JavaScript. I hope you see the pop-up here. Now, however, the goal was to alert document domain. If you try that here, this will result in document.domain, which is not what we want. We want to have the IP here. So I will not go into detail with that because I want to show you another one later with command injections. But basically, what we will do here now is replace this with set timeout. Timeout. And because the parentheses are blocked, we use these backticks here.
Mm-hmm.
Now they are basically like this here. You can imagine it like this. And within that, we can use hex encoding. So we can actually use this one. Then this here will be parenthesis. And now we type in document.domain. Hope this works now. And there we go. We executed that. It's a little bit complicated, I don't know, but
Sven, like right now, we're just really glad you're on our side. To be honest with you, like that's so awesome.
My brain hurts.
Yes,
This is awesome.
I told you your brain would hurt when Sven comes on the show. Your brain will hurt, Larry, and you'll be like, "How do I integrate this into my pen testing?" And you have to go back and listen to the segment that you were already on to figure out.
I'm gonna have to wait for you guys to release this so that I can finish my test this week.
Yes.
Doesn't YouTube have this play 2 times slower option or something?
Yes, we need that with you, Sven.
There's a pause and screenshot capability.
Now, I will quickly show you the command injection one. We just can try to ping google.com here. And this will take a while now, of course. Okay, this one worked. Now I will tell you beforehand that we don't have the.
So this is the command injection that does a ping and it takes the parameters that you give to it. So
exactly.
This is how they broke out of the first Linksys WRT 54G firmware.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Sven.
I will tell you beforehand that we don't have spaces here. They are blocked exactly like $ifs. So we can't use them here. So we'll use X as the host ping should ping actually, because it will instantly fail, and then we don't have to wait that long for the other stuff. Now what I will do here is, since we have a PHP application, we can actually abuse PHP and use this here exec. And uname is blocked too. I forgot to mention that. That's why we can use hex here as well inside these double quotes in PHP. So uname x20 will be the space. and -a. So this will execute -a if we execute it with PHP. Now we have this in a variable. How can we access it with PHP? There's the set command. This will show you all the variables that are set so far. And if we go down here, we find our x equals the PHP code that is not executed yet. However, if we pipe the whole thing to PHP, to the PHP binary, and then do that again, we will see our command here just successfully executed.
I love it.
Sven, like you don't really work for Netsparker. Like you make your living on bug bounties solely for web application companies. Like, come on now. Like you could like make a killing on the research you've done and presented on the show for bug bounties.
As a matter of fact, I don't really do bug bounties a lot. And I can actually use that knowledge for Netsparker to improve the payloads. So I think that's another reason why you should definitely try it. Get a trial of Netsparker and just try it out.
Sven, that was the best answer ever.
Yes,
it really was. It was awesome.
So you might be familiar with PHP object injection. I will just do these quick, so I don't take all the time here.
Yet another reason why PHP sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the many, of course. Now, if you're familiar with the syntax of that, you have something like that. 0. Okay, this would be an object. We have the O, which says it's an object. We have one. The name of the object is just one letter, the X here, which is in double quotes, and we have 0 properties in there. Now, if you want to successfully filter this, you would probably say you will block this colon, I think,
yep,
and the number here. So you can't use O colon and any numbers, and this would be enough to block it. Let's just try this payload here, and as you see, it's blocked. However, you can just use +1 instead of 1. Do that, and we have our object here executed. So a lot of unserialized filters just check if object is there, the O colon, and will block that. Now, other filters might not be that good. They will just block everything that begins with O colon. And if you just write it into an array, like that. I need the +1 here anyway. And use the variable called s or something. Hope this works now and it didn't screw up. Let's check. Yeah, that also works because it didn't work. Didn't begin with O, but rather with A, and just an array that contains this class here.
God.
That's beautiful.
Now something more challenging. I really hope I'm not over the time way too much.
No,
don't care.
No,
don't
Sven,
care.
Don't care. This is like awesome. Like
care.
Larry and I'm like drooling right now.
Okay, so
like this segment's gonna be like you thought you had a WAF that worked until you met Sven. That's what I'm calling this segment right now.
Okay, good. So all available in PHP functions are blocked, including backticks. Now this one is a little bit more challenging, I would say. So what we actually have here, we have this, which is just return and double quotes, I think. And to check this, we can actually inject our double quotes here. It will just throw an internal server error, if you see that here, 500.
I see that a lot when I debug my own applications. Yes.
So if we do that, and then this won't work as well for some reason, just don't know. Yeah. So if we do that and concatenate, I think this with dog, with dog, not with cat. We will see that dog will just be there. So we probably have some some code injection here. Now, dog is not a PHP function. If we use, for example, PHP info here, just this should work. We see that it's blocked. Every PHP function imaginable is blocked. To create this filter, I just used a function that will print every function, and then you add this to the blacklist. Okay, so we can't execute PHP info, you would think. Now, if we use something like $x equals PHP dot info, this will basically concatenate the two to this here.
Yep.
And now, I hope this works the way I do it here. There we go. So PHP has this awesome functionality that if you have a variable with the content of a function name, like $x equals PHP
it'll
info,
dereference it, won't it?
Yep.
and you actually use the variable here and then
Execute it.
use this behind that, you can execute it.
Yay, PHP, winning.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So even though we blocked every imaginable function in PHP, we could still bypass it. So yeah, there's a little bit of stuff. You should generally use whitelists instead of blacklists, of course.
Well, yeah,
just
you can say that with like a high degree of confidence right now, Sven, after your demonstration, which just totally blew us away. You know, myself, Larry, Jeff, Goff, who've been doing this for a long time, that's pretty impressive.
Okay, thank you. So the solution is whitelists. You can't bypass those, right? For example, only allow URLs that start with http://companyname.com to avoid open redirects. You can bypass those as well, actually. For example, like this, companyname.com.attacker.com. Like that's pretty common knowledge. So no whitelists, right? I wouldn't say so. I would say whitelists are better than blacklists. I would definitely recommend, if you have the choice between the two, that you use whitelists. They are easier to maintain. You have less to research and keep in mind about them, as we saw, and they are way more effective. So whitelists, like every other part of your web application, should be implemented properly. This is very often more easier than using a blacklist. Now, how to correctly prevent vulnerabilities. Don't only rely on filters. Whenever possible, use context-dependent sanitization. Try to get familiar with the programming language you use and possible pitfalls. For example, the difference between escape shell arg, escape shell CMD, or in Ruby, I think it is the difference between the caret at the end and the \a/c. For example, this will only match the beginning and the end of the line. That should be $. Okay, sorry. That should be $. Here. This will match the beginning and the end of the line. And you should also get familiar with the language you're trying to sanitize. Now, reasons to use a web application firewall are also reasons to do that. As additional security measure, there's nothing to say against that. I would say it doesn't really hurt to use one. To temporarily protect your application if you can't fix immediately. For example, if we have something like, I don't know, like image tragic or something, there were web application firewalls that would pretty quickly try to mitigate that.
I love that you didn't even refer to it as image magic. It was image tragic. And we both caught it and started laughing.
Okay, good. And yeah, you should really not write it yourself. As you saw, you really have to put some effort in learning all the different cases and what you actually can do with the language. And you should really leave that to people who do that for a living. For example, a professional a company that sells those, or like a community project, which is well maintained. There's nothing against using those. Okay, now a bonus, the last one, I swear, is XSS a filter bypass polyglot actually found on the overs XSS cheat sheet. And it's right here. And I took the liberty to like mark the sections that I would say problematic a little bit. They are marked in yellow here. So they actually think that if you put that in any filter, it will just magically pop an alert. So I marked a few spots that are not that well thought. So, for example, you have double quote and single quote at the beginning, which is not really necessary. You should really try to use a tiny amount of those special chars and see which one works and which one doesn't. Mm-hmm. The SRC attribute should be universally blocked because it's in script SRC. On arrow is also very well known. Mm-hmm. And I really have no idea why there's a marquee tag. You use that with on-start together.
I was going to comment on that, by the way.
The marquee tag isn't even in yellow, but you're saying that's bad.
Yeah, well, why would... Dude, marquee has been largely deprecated by the browsers, including the scroll and the blink tag.
The blink tag.
Marquee and blink has been largely deprecated. Yep.
Exactly. And Chrome, it still works, I think, for some reason. I think it was actually deprecated for a long time. Now that you have the marquee tag, you can use that together with on-start to bypass some filters. That's a pretty handy trick. However, they don't use on-start here. All it does, it would just use the broken image tag here and scroll it around like a news
ticker. Yep.
News ticker, exactly. Nothing else. Confirm should also be known by now by most of the filters. And this here's what I would refer as a general area of WTF. I have no idea what they thought about that one. If you know the plaintext tag, you can close it. Everything that follows after plaintext will just not be passed anymore. That one is also deprecated, by the way, but it also works in Chrome still. And yeah, you can just...
Is plaintext similar to the pre-tag?
No.
No. You still have to sanitize the input in the pre-tag. You don't have to sanitize the input of the plaintext tag.
Okay.
Now here, I don't know what that is. I think it's just for decoration. And now if you paid attention with the plaintext tag, everything after plaintext tag is just ignored by the browser. That means everything after this here is basically not, I don't know, it won't be interpreted anyway. It's just not there's no reason why it should be here. You know, the whole payload would end here. Now, of course, a script tag can also not also has to be in every filter bypass polyglot. I guess JavaScript would also be blocked. So document cookie is blocked as well. That for the simple reason because it's used in almost every tutorial about XSS.
Yep.
And eval should not only be blocked in JavaScript, but also every other language. And of course, you also don't want to have HTTP tag. You don't want to have HTTP in there because it's also very common in script SRC. Now, this should basically be a payload that bypasses a lot of filters, but I think that's a little bit that won't happen. So if I should use some kind of comparison, it's like saying to not get caught during a physical pen test, you should dress as construction worker, employee, garbage man, and security guard at the same time while you use an air horn and shout, "Look away." Like basically it's equally obvious. Yes, so that was my presentation.
Sven, thank you so much for coming on Security Weekly. That was just an awesome technical segment.
I was already texting folks at work to say, dudes, you got to look at this.
Pay attention to this.
Pay attention.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
Sven, thank you for doing some content on this show that advanced pen testers are like, we need to pay attention to this. That means everyone else should as well. For that, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
With that, we're going to take a short commercial break, come back, talk about the stories and security news for this week. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team's skills up to date. IT Pro TV's team solution provides group pricing and access to their supervisor portal. You'll gain full control over your team's training schedule, see individual and group analytics, and more. IT Pro TV does IT live every day, so you know you're getting the most current IT training. Go to itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly.
Holy shit, did we just have a fucking nerd moment? God,
we've come to this realization of two things. One, we're nerds. And two, that we're old.
2019 was the set.
Was the set for Blade Runner.
Yep.
We're getting in preparation for the new Blade Runner movie. Go back and watch Blade Runner. It's amazing. Awesome.
Go back and watch.
What really freaks me out is 2019 is just 2 short years away.
Yeah, like they're in 2019, dude. They're in like flying cars, like going to all these things, like their voice recognition software.
On CRTs?
Albeit it displays on CRTs is what I noticed. I watched the movie a couple of weeks ago, and when Deckard is doing the whole, like, I'm analyzing this image thing, and he's like, zoom in on Sector 4, and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's happening on this old school, like, CRT monitor. I'm like, okay, you kind of got that wrong. Like, that would be a flat screen nowadays. That's fine.
But some of the other technology is like...
Some of the other tech is, like, way... Like, dude, flying cars. Like, why don't we have... And Jack said this... Go ahead, Jeff. You're older than all of us.
Hold up your mobile device.
Yeah. It's somewhere.
And then watch Star Trek, the original series.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And it will also argue, go watch Apollo 13 and hold up your mobile device. And this has more computing power than all the computing power they put a man on the moon.
But to go back to Jeff's point... because my mom is still to this day a huge Star Trek fan and one that got me into science fiction and Star Trek, and started watching it when it was first coming on the air in those days for the original series,
that
right?
was my dad, and I watched it with him.
And
Jeff, the original series in black and white on a 19-inch screen, and probably the first couple years of syndication.
Yeah, but you're not as old as my mom,
When I first saw it on a color TV, it blew my mind. I didn't know they had different.
Now hold on, Jeff. But you're not. But Jeff, you're not as old as my mom. You're not in your 60s, are you?
No, I'm in my 50s.
Okay, so you watched some reruns of it.
No, I watched the original series.
I watched original when I was.
So maybe there was an age difference.
Yep.
In any case,
Amazon Hornet, which had you're a kung fu guy. The Green Hornet TV series had
Green Hornet.
Bruce Lee played Kato.
Yep. You didn't actually know he wore a green uniform until you saw him on color TV.
No,
he was the limo driver.
Green uniform.
He was the chauffeur.
It was actually black with a black mask.
Yeah. But because it showed up better on black and white TV.
Time Tunnel was another great original show.
So Amazon has
The Fugitive.
I love the original Star Trek. Just to talk about nerd stuff, and the Amazon has like the top 10 most popular or most famous Star Trek original series episodes. You can buy like the playlist of just those episodes.
The best.
But it's all the ones that like I remember watching with my mom and like being like, these are like the best, like the ones with the
Tribbles, Sex with Green Alien.
Tribbles is number one.
Yeah.
The Trouble with Tribbles.
Yep.
Yeah. You do realize that Star Trek was released in 1966, so that makes it 51 years old now. So
Yeah.
you'd have to be pretty damn old if you're going to be watching the original series.
Oh, so that means I was watching reruns.
I was
were
watching reruns.
reruns.
Yeah,
I
I was watching
am
reruns.
that old.
I was
Hey, look,
watching
we're
reruns.
Brady bunching. I love that.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. It was really groundbreaking for a lot of reasons, and still somewhat relevant today. You know,
And
it's
now
just a whole like incorporation of different races and Uhura. Of course, there's a lot of controversy.
Yeah,
but, like,
absolutely.
it was groundbreaking for so many reasons, not just technology, but the whole sociology aspect of it. I love it to this day for that reason.
Continued on to quote some of the more modern stuff.
Oh yeah, the newer movies are. They're okay. They're okay.
I
I'll watch them. I'll watch them because I'm a fan of the series. But,
and Jeff, to throw down some nerd cred there. The first time I ever saw Star Trek was on a television that my dad built from Heathkit. It was a color TV.
So that's where you get that from.
Yep, but even better, and it's in my in some of my bios in various places that the first color TV that I ever watched some of this stuff on was a color TV built from a Heathkit kit by my dad. The Heathkit kit was actually provided third party by another company, and I can't remember the company's name. They actually produced television sets. Mm-hmm. And basically, instead of producing the television, they just put all the parts in the box and made you assemble it. The problem is this company made television sets that were famous for catching on fire and were actually sued because the television sets caught on fire and burnt down and killed a number of families.
That's terrible.
And the television set that my dad built from Heathkit actually caught on fire on 2 different occasions and ended up in our basement where he repaired it with your, quote, original replacement parts type of deal the first time, and then it caught on fire a second time, and he rebuilt it, and I helped him rebuild it the second time.
But you know what's funny? I want to just put this. Well, hold on.
If there isn't nerd cred there, I don't know what is.
Now hold on. I know this is off topic. I want to put this in perspective for our listeners. Larry, last week, and Larry, how old are you? You're just over 40 years
42.
old, right? Came into studio last week and handed me a keyboard and was like, "Paul, I built this keyboard from a parts kit." Like that's how full circle we come.
Yes.
From like speaking of who we are on the podcast today, that was cool.
And to give us that keyboard that you saw,
yeah,
I am building a replica, an identical match to that, but
a replicant,
but
almost.
but better.
It has the keys, like the numbers and letters are on them.
So the keyboard that I built has no lettering on the keycaps,
which is pretty badass.
I am building a 60% keyboard. Galen and I are building a 60% keyboard with custom keycap set, all labeled with matrix font, with glowing, and we are giving it away.
Oh yeah, you are
at
doing
our
a contest
booth at DerbyCon.
Nice, that's awesome.
My small contribution to this geek out. What year do you remember is the earliest time you saw any kind of streaming video or TV network broadcast on your computer? What's the earliest you remember seeing some sort of broadcast on?
Oh,
I want to say I got. So hold on, I got cable internet from Cox Cable here in Rhode Island in Jeff. I want to say 2000 or 2001, around that time frame.
And I want to clarify, and I mean by streaming media, meaning something I downloaded and I streamed to another device in my own home, or something I streamed via the internet.
I would say whatever, network broadcast. What was streaming live? You picked it up on your computer.
Oh,
and we're watching it online. I will trump all. I'm guessing I will trump all of you. I want to say it was 1989.
Yeah, you're way beyond us. Speaking of media,
I wouldn't exactly say maybe something I saw that was news, but it might have been the coffee bot at MIT.
So, but here,
No, this
speaking of-
was an app that we were running on a Unix workstation that was getting a network feed from one of the local networks. So we were watching live
awesome.
TV.
I do want to say that speaking of media that we're talking about in TV shows and movies and stuff, HBO social media accounts have been hacked. Now, I want to preface this with there have been a lot of networks that have been attacked. Game of Thrones, Orange
Which
is the
is
new
H-
Still
HBO.
HBO.
still HBO, but also Orange is the New Black. which I be-
HBO.
Is that Showtime or
HBO.
HBO?
No, that's Netflix.
It's Netflix.
Oh, it's
Thank you,
Netflix,
Jeff.
yep.
It's
Yeah,
Netflix. A lot of shows have had compromises that are basically like ransomware. Like we've either stolen your actual media and or we've stolen your scripts and we're going to release those to the public unless you pay us some kind of ransom. And that seems to be the trend. We talked about that in our interview with Graham Cluley.
Yeah.
I find that kind of an interesting trend that we're seeing today. HBO seems to be the primary victim of this attack.
Right. Well,
And
'cause-
it has been extended now to their social media accounts. So my first question is kind of like, why do... I'll call them hackers, but it's not the right term. Like, why do the evil bad guys that are doing this, or gals, on the
I
internet,
think I have an answer.
like, why are they doing this to HBO? What is it about HBO that's grinding
right
everything?
now, I think the reason for HBO, and you talk about all the things that they say they're going to release, is right now, within the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've lost count because, oh my God, insanity of
Life, yeah.
Game of Thrones
Vegas.
has started its new season. And this is an opportunity
It's an
for them
opportune
to
time.
cash in.
Okay.
Like, hey, you've got this new season, which my understanding, and I could be wrong, and I can hear people yelling at me in the car right now, is the last season of Game of Thrones. Like, hey, this is the opportunity to cash in. We're going to release all your shit that you've got out there, and you guys can't
But I have
profit
a
from it.
really stupid follow-up question for that, Larry.
No stupid
And
questions.
I don't watch Game of Thrones, but if I understand correctly, it's based on some sort of novel or series of novels.
It is.
Much like Walking Dead?
So is not the last
but
season kind of already available if you've read the book?
But so is The Walking Dead.
Yep.
And they've taken some liberties. They've also taken liberties with Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Same with all of the Lord of the Rings movies.
Those were all books.
They were all books. And you know what? I have not read.
A single book.
Oh no! I haven't read a book in a long time. I've
nobody
listened
reads
to a
books
lot of them on Audible and such, but I have not read the Game of Thrones. I have not read The Walking Dead. I have the comic books for The Walking Dead. Sometimes it's great to do both, and a lot of people that I know have never read the books for the Game of Thrones because they want to see the visual aspect and they want
Well,
someone.
they've been following the show.
And the big thing is,
As
it's
my
also a
son
great
says,
moneymaker.
He's a millennial. If the book's good enough, they'll make a movie out of it.
Yeah. And you know what? I will do both. I will fully admit that
You go both ways, Larry.
I do. I do go both ways. And I will fully admit that I read all of the Twilight books. Every single one of them. And you know what?
That's disturbing in
And you know
so
what?
many ways, Larry.
I have seen-
Larry and I's love for each other is still a better love story than
It is.
Twilight.
It is.
I'm just-
Agreed.
I'm
It
just
is.
saying.
It is. And you know what? I've seen every one of the movies.
I've seen Larry and Paul Sparkley.
And you know what? I have seen every one of the movies. And for entertainment value and entertainment value alone, they were fantastic.
How does this relate to security again? I'm just wondering.
Why were they targeting HBO? Why? Because
why do we care that episodes of any show series is hacked and out there?
Why? Because HBO has a vested monetary interest in it, and the hackers know that.
So it's a monetary.
It's a monetary thing. Did they say hack a it's not the ransomware, but it's ransomware. We're not going to lock down your system.
So let's talk about
Let's talk about attribution.
No,
Oh, God. No,
let's
no,
not.
that- no,
hold
that-
on. Let's
that-
talk about. Let's talk about something that has nothing to do with making money, and for the sheer so people, it sickens me that there are people out there that do this just for the sheer thrill of the result of watching the expression on someone's face, and that's what this article references. So the article title is "Women Targeted with 120 Images on Public Transport via airdrop." And let's take you back to 2003, and we covered this early days on Security Weekly.
We did.
Where you could pair to someone's Bluetooth phone.
Yep.
You could upload images, and they would view those images. That attack largely kind of dropped off as manufacturers figured out how to secure Bluetooth on their...
We also, I don't remember when, but we did go into the whole AirPlay thing about leaving your AirPlay device enabled.
But this is AirDrop.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, AirDrop. Yeah, absolutely.
And this is a function... No, what confuses me about this article is that it says that it's NFC.
It's not. It's
from what my understanding, like NFC is like I don't have my device, but like I get my phone.
It's a euphemism.
No, it's not a euphemism.
No.
I get my NFC enabled smartphone. I take my NFC device, and whether I'm paying for something or using some kind of two-factor authentication, I have to like physically put those
within reason. Yeah.
In my experience, I had to physically like touch those devices to each other in order to get some NFC transfer to happen.
Or very close to.
Or very close to. In my experience, when I pay for something...
AirDrop is based on an 802.11 protocol, which has extended range. It is not NFC.
Oh, okay. This article described it as NFC.
It is not NFC. Okay. AirDrop is significant distance range. And for example, I can go to DEF CON and I can turn on AirDrop, and I can search for AirDrop devices in my local proximity over wireless.
And it's an 802.11. That makes way more sense. Thank you, Larry. Because the article described it as NFC, and I'm like, well, when I pay for something or I use the two-factor authentication like from Yubico, I have to physically like press those devices together.
No, it is not
for the NFC transfer to happen. In this case, I get what you're saying. It's 802.11. So from a distance, I can basically what they were doing. And this is terrible, is they were taking 120 images of penises and they were putting that on someone else's device for the sheer thrill of watching that person's reaction. Now, largely...
or Smalley, as the
case. Or Smalley, whatever the case may be, they were targeting women to be able to, like, get a stream of 120 dick pics, essentially, which I just think is... Like
juvenile.
It's like, why would you do like? Now, the other thing about that whole scenario is you can be prosecuted under several federal or state
sexual
laws as basically it's the same thing as if you would have basically.
Maybe they wanted to do security images, but somebody hacked them
No, Jeff. Essentially,
penis.
No,
nice try.
I want to make light of this subject, but I read the article and I'm like, there's no making light of this because the law states in the UK and conceivably the US, and I'll defer to an expert, but like it's the same thing as you showing your junk to some random woman on the train, Jeff. Like that's the extent of it. Like it's prosecuted the exact same way, and it's not something you should do. It's not a joke.
It's a crime.
On the joking,
it's a crime. Thank you, Jeff.
On the joking side, we had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day that's back in the dating scene, and they thought they had found someone that was like, they were started talking to, and all of a sudden the dick pic comes in. And we were sitting at breakfast with this person, and the dick pic comes in, and she's like totally embarrassed. And we had a conversation about like, when did it become a good idea, and when did it become successful to send dick pics to folks and actually work? Because my generation, our generation, get off my lawn, dude. That's not a thing.
No, but you hit the nail on the head, right? Like I've had conversations with my female friends years ago before this story broke, and they're like, I'm talking to someone that might be interested, like legitimately having a relationship with me, and like maybe going on a date, and then they're like, all of a sudden it's like, I get a picture of their penis. It's like. I'm like, dude, like, what do you do? Like you and I, like, a lot of us on the show, like, we've been married for some time. I'm like, so hold on. Like, what do you do when you when that happens? Like, how is that socially acceptable?
Like my thing is, I don't think it would ever be appropriate for me to send a pic of my penis to anyone.
I don't do that to my wife.
Then, exactly.
Right?
I'm married to the woman, for crying out loud.
Like,
and she's
no.
seen it. And
No.
like, I don't send her pictures of it.
No, she does not want to see a picture of that on her phone.
But
like,
now my thing is, if you're going to do that, and be classy. Send a dick pic.
What is that? What?
Go Google DIK. It is a very small antelope. A dick. Go send a dick pic.
Oh, what, you have to like zoom in on it?
No, it's a small. No, you don't have to zoom in on it. It's a small antelope. It's called a DIK. Like, hey, I'm going to send you a picture, and you send a picture of a dick. Like, to me, if I were to send, if I were to send a woman a dick pic, I would send him a dick pic because, like,
It's
hey,
a small cute animal.
because I didn't send someone or a
picture
pic.
of my
I sent him a dick pic that
awful.
was just funny because like that's how I roll.
But what is interesting?
We're all so old. We're wondering why this is a thing. I wonder why this is a thing.
But why do people do it? Does it work? Because maybe I need to. No. I never need to start trying this.
You're married, so in theory, you don't need to worry about it.
Right. It should never work. Now, the other thing about this article is that it states that...
Mark's sending dick pics right now. He's in the bathroom.
Probably to me.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine.
Mark needs to wear those pants pics.
But... So one of the victims of this attack, which I feel bad for because like it's just awful.
It's awful.
But one of the victims says, "Well, you know, a lot of people, and I can see this on social media, and I've witnessed it myself, where people say, well, if you don't want to be a victim of this attack, disable AirDrop." And it's like, well, I need that to be able to do other things on my phone. So while that prevents against this attack, I can't use my phone the way I want to use my smartphone in my everyday.
But it's like Facebook privacy settings. There are complexities to it, and not everybody understands it. And I would argue that I have AirDrop enabled, and I have AirDrop accept from everyone, just because I want to see what people send to me.
Yeah.
And you can change that. You can have it sent from only accept stuff from people in your
contact list. But like when you go ride the subway every day, you shouldn't have to think about, I'm leaving my house, I got to disable AirDrop because someone's going to send me 120 pictures.
Like
male genitalia.
But
like
if somebody, but for me, if like somebody sends me a pic of a meme or something, like great, or if someone sends me a dick pic, like I wouldn't be offended, but there are people that
contact your local authorities, and if that doesn't work, send the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi address of that person's phone. You know what? Send it to us, and we'll deal with it for you. Thank you very much. Yes. We'll send it to our entire network, and we'll just deal with that for you.
Yeah, because
that shouldn't happen. To be honest with you,
if you're going to send unsolicited AirDrop pictures, you shouldn't be trying to do that because that's gross.
It is.
Make someone's day happier and send them dick pics.
Move on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, Jeff, thank you. I was going to segue into another story from that in terms of attribution.
So I have one. If you're talking about attribution,
Yeah.
Attribution is hard. My story number 5. So I highly suggest that you go click on the link because I think it's fucking hilarious. Paul, you should go click on the link because it's really important.
Attribution is hard. Hold on, I see it. I'm clicking on it.
So it is a story from IT Security Central with the top 20 IT security influencers from Twitter, and if you get down to what is it, Jack Daniel and me. Wait, no, go back down.
Oh, that's me. Hold on, I'm on me.
Wait, no, it's not you.
No, wait, me is you. You is me. We're each other. We're one.
Well, so it's like the top 20 security influencers from Twitter, and that's the one that I thought was hilarious. That it says Paul Asadorian, and it has my Twitter handle and my Twitter profile and my Twitter bio.
And I would say that probably 85% of the people on this list are people that we know.
Yep, I would agree.
And love and encourage you to follow.
Yeah, I would agree that this is a great list,
it is.
Including Paul Asadorian.
Including Larry Pesce. What are the?
I'm amused.
Yeah, I thought that was absolutely great. I just stumbled across it because they ended up in the notification. Hey, we just posted the top 20 security influencers on Twitter, and I was named in the list. I'm like, what? Holy shit!
So
and then it's Paul.
So here's the thing, Larry.
No, it's really me.
I want to put out there for our listeners in the general community, probably once or twice a month, we get an email or some kind of correspondence from a company that it's like, hey, you've been named the top X security X
and
list.
It's always this guy.
No, and it's always one of us will be on that, that list.
I haven't seen me on one of those lists.
No,
whatever.
You are.
Whatever.
You're like the top security X, influencer.
I'm not butthurt.
Blogger. It's nothing to be butthurt about. It's like they're just analyzing based on statistics. Like who is in security, and they're like
big data.
The only thing they're trying to do, Larry, is this. They're trying to say, hey, you, whoever you are, person in Security Weekly, person in security community, you're on this list. Could you retweet or promote that you've been on this list?
Yep.
And they're only trying to build their own brand so they can sell ads based on zero knowledge, but
of what
like
you actually do.
100% of like shady scam hacking.
Or they're saying, hey, you're a member of this list and you're like number 2, but you got to pay us $500 to be published.
It's just all, scam.
Hey, did you know you're on the IT security top 100 list? Would you like a framed certificate for $500?
Yeah.
So you can show your mom?
Bad.
Yeah, no.
It's all bad, pretty much.
I'm in a who's who book in something technology.
Oh, that's a college
years
thing.
ago.
That's a college thing. It used to mean something at some point.
Yep, it did. I remember those, and I remember you had to pay like $40 for it or something like that. But
yep,
I was in one, but I didn't have to pay.
I didn't pay the money to get my own copy of the book, so somebody's got it on their shelf somewhere.
I was in one when it meant they contacted your professors that had to nominate you.
Oh.
And that's what I feel like it meant something, right? Like if
that might have been where it started, but this one was when I was working in the DoD.
Yep, I got.
But I feel like
shortly thereafter.
But it's a good point, Jeff and Larry. You know, if they contact people who know you and ask you to rank people, that's when it means something. If you have to pay to be on the list, it doesn't mean anything. Anyway.
I got one of those many years, and we were
welcome
talking
to
about
our world.
We
get like, if I could only describe the emails that we all get every day from people, they're like, "Hey, I read your website,"
and I think this thing about baby moms would be great.
No, the pregnancy one. We got one of those like a pregnancy
today.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And unfortunately, we all get the same emails.
We do, because our email, we have a list that everyone who hosts a show on Security Weekly, we're all on the same list. So we get ones to that one. I get ones individual. Like it's just bad. Pretty much all. Now, I shouldn't say all 100%. There's a small 5% that I do follow up with, and it is a legitimate thing. The 95% of the ones internally, we just
make fun of.
The funny, like sometimes I get in a mode where we get emails and they're like, "Oh, I read your blog, and I really think that I have content that could really enhance your blog." And I'm like, "Oh." So sometimes I'll respond back to it. Every once in a while, like I get bored and I'm like, "Oh, so you read our blog?" I'm like, "What was your favorite post, and why was it your favorite post on our blog?" And they're like, like deer in headlights. You can tell it's like deer in headlights response. Like, I don't know. I'm like, so you didn't really read our blog. You're just saying that you did. Like, no one has the 95% never has a good response to that question, and they will never email us again.
Nope.
I can spend all day, every day, just responding to those emails.
You should use an autoresponder. Which was your favorite?
We do. We need an autoresponder.
If content includes, I read your blog, read and blog, respond with, which one was your favorite?
Like you so want to
Respond with
like
an automatic survey.
Yeah.
you want to be hopeful, Joff. Like, oh, I read your blog and that one on Responder where you talked about like exploiting Mimikatz and doing that stuff. That was my favorite one. Like, I'd be like, well, I'm kind of impressed. Like, let's talk.
Yeah.
But that's like the 3 to 5%, maybe.
Yeah, if that.
If that.
Now, kicking it old school, I used to, and I still do because we still have a landline, like to answer the telemarketing calls and try to get the telemarketers to hang up on me.
Yeah. So Jeff, we still
Very
have
similar, Jeff.
we still have a
Jeff,
landline, and I found a great one today that I answered, and it was like, my mom's been having some cancer treatment and that type of stuff, and it was a local number. It was in the 401 area.
Increasingly more in your local area
Yep.
code.
And it said something about cancer. So I answered it, and I thought maybe it was someone trying to book an appointment for her because I'm responsible for that. And I pick it up, and I say, hello, and there's a pause. I'm like,
Oh, we're fog.
Auto dial is flipping it over to the live
and it says, Kristen? Like, no, this is Larry. Oh, that's okay. I can speak to either of you. I'm like, okay. And then it goes on like, oh, we're with blah, 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 and we're with the Cancer Institute, blah, blah, and we're soliciting donations. And I'm like, and I'm so glad to not talk to another answering machine. Ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, fuck you. And my answer was, this is an automated thing that understands what I say. And I immediately just, without whatever is going on, I say, do not call list. And immediately the conversation stops and says, we'll add you to our do not call list and we'll never call you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like,
my story number 2, unpatchable flaw in modern cars allows hackers to disable safety features. And I was like reading this. I'm like, this could be like really breaking research. However,
I think we put I think I may have put this in a couple of weeks ago, but it's okay. But we didn't get to it. But
Larry, what's the thing that basically makes this not something we should jump up and down in our chairs about?
I didn't read this specifically.
Requires physical access to the vehicle.
Yeah, there you go. Now, physical access to the vehicle is becoming less and less of a problem, given that we're talking about.
Yeah, but like if you have physical, it's like the computer. If you have physical access to the vehicle or the computer, sure you can own it in some particular way.
Absolutely.
I agree.
But
to play devil's advocate to my own argument, yes, the CAN bus on vehicles should be secured the same way like layer 2 security and protocol should be considered securing computers. However, it still requires physical access.
But now the CAN bus is largely secured by another physical layer, the locks, the doors, and so forth. But we're learning more and more that the bypassing of the locks and being able to do replay attacks against the wireless locks that come in modern vehicles are becoming are being more and more defeated. And getting physical access potentially to these vehicles, the restriction is less and less. We've talked a number of times about vehicles being stolen, or I've seen stories about vehicles being stolen, and some famous names have had their vehicles stolen out of various restaurants and stuff when they've done valet and you name it. And even to the point in the upcoming 617 course with the updates, we talk about replay-based attacks in that late model Jeep stuff. You can actually take the unlock code or the lock and the unlock codes from the Jeeps and actually replay it unmodified, and it will unlock. And I own one of those.
Hold on. Via a key fob or via...
key fob.
So on my GM vehicle...
Yep.
Which I described to our listeners. We're going to get someone on the show that actually works in the security team for GM. We're trying to get him on the show. Yesterday... one of my sons came up to me and said, I need to go in the car and get something, and it's locked. He's like, I need the keys. I'm like, hold on, I can go on my app and I can unlock the car from my phone. That's different from having the key fob.
Yes.
Very, very different.
Now, it is.
I own a GM vehicle.
Yep.
One of my vehicles is from GM, and they spend a lot of time on security for that
They do.
application, which I'm very grateful
They do.
for. However, being in this industry for as long as I have been, 17 plus years, I'm very concerned about that level of security.
Yep. Now, the problem
that makes me old.
The problem is
some are curmudgeon-y at this point as well.
The modules for those vehicles have
You're halfway there.
Halfway, yeah. I'm halfway. I'm half curmudgeon at this point.
So the vehicle as designed that's sitting in your driveway, what year is that? What model year?
It's a 2017
2017.
Yeah.
Now, the design for that vehicle didn't happen in 2016. It didn't happen in 2015. It didn't happen in 2014. It didn't happen in 2013. It may have happened in 2012 or 2011, maybe even 2010.
You know, did
and
you
the,
see
and the modules and the security perspective that were applied to that was at the time when those were designed.
No, it's a good point. Did you see the Daily Dave post? We haven't talked about Daily Dave in a while.
No, we haven't.
Dave Vitale's
and I
awesome,
haven't because I stopped subscribing to Daily Dave a long time ago.
Oh, that's too bad.
But Daily Dave is still awesome.
Dave is awesome.
And it was mostly because I got inundated.
They talked about the CTF kind of thing at DEF CON that they did. I was watching that right before the show. There was basically, and I'm trying to understand exactly how it happened. I'm not sure if both offense and defense were hands off for this exercise, but they did it at DEF CON.
Was this the vehicle CTF?
No, it was artificial intelligence kind of CTF. So basically, vendors had to develop AI to protect their systems. Red teams had to develop AI to attack those systems.
This is very much the cyber challenge from the year prior.
It was 2016, I think.
Yes.
And the video was coming out talking about 2016, right?
Yes.
And they basically released the artificial intelligence at one time, and I think you're right, Larry. It was last year.
Last year,
yeah. But they just released the video to talk about, to summarize it all because it's so complex to talk about. Hey, they show people cutting the cord. This is the last communications any defender will have with the network, and it's cut. And then we're going to introduce the attacker's artificial intelligence and what all happened. It's very similar to what you're talking about vehicle security. You develop your security model basically in a black box, not knowing what is going to happen.
The future is going to bring.
Yeah.
Yep. And the last year's CTF was really interesting in that, from my understanding, I could be wrong, most of it played out a little bit before the con, in that it was very much an AI based, and the AI had to find zero day in shit. And they had to design AI to find zero day in stuff.
One of the most fascinating.
And it was unbelievable. Now
read the thread on Daily Dave, but go dig into them and watch the videos in the background. Really, really cool shit.
And absolutely, it was such cool shit that one of the guys that I met during my first DEF CON, is
that the one where you were naked?
Yes,
in the morning on
the hood of a car.
Hood of a car. Yep,
that one, and it was that was just a rumor. One of the gentlemen that I met
just a rumor.
During my first DEF CON,
it's still to this day just a rumor.
Yep. During my first DEF CON, one of the gentlemen that I met,
Joff is losing it. Joff's what is going on?
Actually broke his moratorium on being filmed to commentate that particular event. Visigoth. In Visigoth. Yeah, Vizzy.
I saw Vizzy for the first time. Well, someone who claims to be Vizzy. Anyway.
Okay. We'll talk about that later.
I will shroud him in secrecy.
Yeah. Someone who claims to be Vizzy.
Someone who claims to be Vizzy, who's awesome, who we love.
In Visigoth. Vizzy, for short.
Who's been a long-time listener of this show.
And been a long-time fanboy of said show.
Of the show.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Vizzy's awesome, and I hope to get a chance to catch up with him. And now that he's maybe lifted some of his moratorium, maybe he'll come on the show.
That would be awesome.
Yep.
We exchanged hugs at DEF CON this year. I'm dude, I specifically remember you as one of those figures shrouded in secrecy.
Vizzy made one of my first and second year of DEF CON the memorable thing why I have to go back every year. He and a few other of our listeners are ones that why DEF CON is a thing for me. So, moving along.
Hey,
What else we got?
Can we change gears
Hell yeah.
and ask a philosophical political question?
Like we haven't already, Jeff.
Let's do it, Jeff. I'm curious to see
And,
now.
and Joff has
You
been
said philosophical.
Joff has been largely silent, so we need to get him in.
Philosophical and political, Jeff. I am so curious as to where you're going to go with this.
So, there's been some things happening the last week or so in the United States. And,
Really?
All sorts of things happening in the media and politics and all that
Twitter
kind of stuff.
and yeah.
How does everybody feel about hacker groups like Anonymous, hacktivism, going after and taking over websites, and social media sites that they feel are offensive?
This has been going on for a long time. This is very much.
No, you're right, Larry.
Very much with the jester Tango Down has been taking over sites that he thought was politically incorrect and or ISIS related, and all this stuff has been going on for a long time.
But I just want to qualify that, Larry. Like, politically incorrect and like outright hateful and disgraceful are two totally different things, and I think that
agreed.
There's groups involved in all different spectrums. For like you said, Larry, from the beginning of time,
This is not new.
No, it's not new. I think there have been, Jeff, to your point, groups within the computer hacking, call them good or better, indifferent, right? But there are groups that within computer hacking spectrums, and I think this has been largely kind of how do you call it, like evangelized through the TV show Mr. Robot, right?
Yep.
Where there's the hacker mentality. Either it's a single person or a group that is like, hey, there's a group out there that like hates people or doing bad things, and we're going to target them.
Yep.
And we're going to take them down. That's been going on, as Larry said, for a long time.
And
I don't want to condone anyone. I don't want to condone anyone's behavior because, look, like if you're a hate group, like you're likely a deplorable human beings that have a particular stance on things. However, if you're violating state or federal law
or license agreements,
and doing that similar kind of thing, you're still breaking the law.
Yep.
And that's I don't want to give that perception to those of us coming into the industry as well. Like we're putting on an event here in Rhode Island in October that we're speaking to the 50 or some odd schools in Rhode Island that are partaking in Cyber Patriot and trying to develop the next generation.
Make sure I know about that because I'd like to, if it schedule allows.
Like, if not the next or next generation of cybersecurity professionals in our field, and you're absolutely invited to partake in that, Larry. And I don't want to send the message to them that like any kind of hacking is good hacking. There's certainly lines there.
And Joff, I want you to comment, and I have a comment afterwards.
Yeah, okay. So I think
I'd like to, go ahead,
Paul. It's Joff's turn.
So just in closing, like your political beliefs and your like what you're going to hack and enact whatever kind of like bad things on, and take two things into consideration, like, or really just one thing, like. The law is one thing, certainly, and not all groups that exist on the planet are necessarily good. However, if you feel strongly about an issue, you can't necessarily you can't violate federal and state law to do that. There are more proper ways. Yeah, or internet. You can't. There's proper ways to go about that. So, Joff.
I think you're all circling around. Yeah, if you don't mind, Jeff, I'll just make a comment. I think you're all circling around something that I've been thinking about for some time, and to me, it all comes back to the Constitution of the United States. And there's this thing called the Bill of Rights, otherwise known as the Amendments to the Constitution.
Yes, sir.
Which I like to think about it more as the Bill of Privileges, because the way I say it to my children and the way that I say it to my friends is that with every great privilege comes
great responsibility. Yes. And with every great responsibility comes great privilege.
Exactly. And the word that Paul was circling around, I think, is responsibility. So hate groups are not exercising responsibility. They may be exercising free speech, but they're certainly not doing it in a responsible way, in my opinion. And anybody that engages in hacktivism is a little bit the same way. They're exercising the freedom to do that, but they don't, there's a responsibility and there are ramifications to what they're doing.
Well, and Geoff, to your point, what I really want to point out for this show is that within the context of federal, state, and international law, if you're bringing facts to public light, that's okay.
That's not called defamation.
But as long as you're following the law, like, that's okay, right? And that's one kind of aspect to everything that's going on. Certainly, there's everyone's opinions, which
and opinions like assholes. Everybody's got one, and everyone stinks.
Absolutely, and there are certainly groups within. Now, and I don't want to, and I think where everyone had a lot of criticism is to the president, to various law enforcement agencies. The whole thing is people bring their opinions into that. There are certainly groups that we've talked about in the show for the past 12 years, right? Like, they are absolutely under scrutiny from law enforcement from the U.S. for, like, deplorable things.
Others.
Or potentially, because they have been proven in a court of law, according to this country, right?
You think about anti-Semite behavior in Germany. Like, it's not just us.
But we've talked about on this show, a lot of people have made this, argument, not specifically to me, but brought up in conversation. I'm like, like we've covered on the show, like, there are law enforcement agencies that have investigated domestic terror for some time, and we respect and support them in that effort. And, like, I don't know. There's a lot of crossing lines here today in the political spectrum.
And let's put it this way. I want to make sure that I'm understood that I respect your right to say whatever the hell you want. And when it offends me, don't be offended when I tune out. But I would never punch you in the face for saying what you believe. Paul, you could tell me, dude, I'm a Republican. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'm a Democrat. And you know what? We can be friends.
Yeah, but
because you can believe in different things than I do, and
that's fine. But you know what I think the line is Larry, if you and I were on an investigation and we were helping to support someone, a law enforcement agency was like, we're trying to find that this group was violating the law and using digital means to do so.
Definitely.
You know, I'd be like, yeah, you know what?
Yeah, you know what?
We're all about like our political whatever.
Whatever.
Even if we agreed or completely disagreed on political views, you and I both be like, yeah, no, we're gonna go get the bad guys.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, and that's where I think when people are losing sight of like what people's views and opinions are.
I know
today.
I think I know where Geoff is going with this article or with this comment. And if you don't mind, I'd like the production crew to put the camera specifically on me because I want to be profound for a moment. So they're apparently not listening to the show because that's okay.
Civic responsibility was the word I was about to say.
So civic responsibility for this, I think where Geoff is going, because I want to be presidential for a moment and do this regardless of your political affiliation, that I want to do this and I want to hold on the podium and I want to do this and act presidential and say fake news that many of these sites were not taken down because of hackers, that in fact these political groups put up their own notifications that they were taken down by hackers, and in fact they're actually taken down because they violated the terms or agreements of the services that they were using.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they put up these big notices that saying, hey, oh, fuck, we got taken down by these government agencies because they said we couldn't say the things that we wanted to say. And no, they put these things up because, in fact, like, GoDaddy's like, you can't serve hate speech from our shit. and all of a sudden, like, they realize, like, oh shit, they got a hate speech on our shit. Like, no, you're out of here. And Cloudflare said the same thing. Yeah, no, you can't protect the fact that you can say hate speech from our shit because we don't allow you to say hate speech. But go elsewhere.
It goes back to, like, if Larry and I were tasked with over however long we've known each other, right, 13 years or whatever, like, if we were tasked with, like, finding bad and investigating bad, our political views wouldn't go into that. We'd be like,
this is bad.
We'd be exactly where you're stating now, Larry. We'd be like, hold on, the terms of service state this.
Yep.
That group is, or whoever is violating this, and that's bad.
Do you know how many times in an incident response that I've thrown away anything I believe in?
Yeah.
And I've said, no, this violates law. And that violates law. I may agree with what they're saying, but this violates law.
Or disagree. It doesn't matter, right?
And this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What I hear you guys saying is whether you're a website that's violating the terms of the agreement, or a hacker or hacker group that's taking it upon themselves to censor, for lack of a better term, there's guilt on both sides.
Sure. Well, and I would argue that the censor is maybe a bad word in that if it is not a censorship, if we ask you to say, hey, if you want to talk about your stuff here, great. We respect all of these things except these things that are illegal. In these various countries. And if you publish these things that are illegal in these various countries, you're out. That's not censorship. That's legal. That's not censorship. You could call it censorship, but it's not. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. No, that's a good distinction.
And I think that's a very, very good distinction between your comments, Jeff, is that censorship is not necessarily censorship. It's that, hey, if you want to come on my property and open in the state of Rhode Island, we have no open carry law. If you want to come on my property and I permit you to open carry on my property firearm, you can do so. I can open carry on my own property, but as soon as I step off my property, I am no longer legally entitled to open carry.
Yeah, and look, everything you're saying comes back to the comment I make. You know, law abiding is civically responsible.
Yes,
it really is that simple in the end. And unfortunately, there are too many people that are civically irresponsible. And that's just the fact.
And laws were made for a reason, and sometimes you may not agree with them, but take your consequences.
Next story or wrap up.
What do we got left, Paul?
What else is out there?
I got one more story. I know that I feel like I have one more story.
I have one more short, if you don't mind, because we talked about it at the beginning. Make it quick.
It's a really tough one, guys. You're putting me on the spot here.
Let me do mine first.
Okay.
USB security. We talked about that. USB connection is less secure than is thought. And the big one is that folks are figuring out that Universal Serial Bus, USB, is a bus, and that you can observe other traffic on said bus. And, you can sniff all that shit on the bus, and it includes information leakage, just like eating a bunch of Lestra, and that we can get a lot more out of USB bus than we actually thought we could. And PCI is often tied to USB.
Is that the stuff that causes anal leakage
and fecal urgency? Yes.
I will point out for my Adelaide hometown crew, this is from the University of Adelaide. That was I grew up, so big shout out to the Adelaide computer science folks. Good job.
Yep. So effectively what they're saying is the take-home message is that people shouldn't connect anything to USB unless they can fully trust it. Meaning something that you can connect to USB can sniff anything that goes over USB anywhere on the device. Anywhere. It's a bus. It means you think about when you were on a bus as a kid going to school, that everything on that bus was available to anyone. You just had to listen in the right places.
I'm gonna choose this next story. Organizations are willing to try out longer password.
I knew you'd go with passwords.
I love it.
Because I am like disheartened. So I think that in the 20 years that we've been trying to push the secure computing initiative to end users, right? The password has been pretty much the crux, one of the crux of the issues.
Because it had nothing better.
But what I find troubling is that, well, okay, so let me talk about the positive side first. What I find positive is that this study finds that overwhelmingly that users are willing to implement a passphrase versus a password.
Yep.
And I think that
correct horse battery staple.
But like, let's look at the past 10 or 15 years we've been doing security, and we can say, yeah, you know what? I think users are starting to come around to the fact that it's not an 8-character, you must have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters kind of password, like move to a passphrase. Now, where I really find interesting in this kind of research is multi-factor authentication. And the quote here really it blows me away.
Really grinds your gears.
Multi-factor authentication, and I quote, is very effective in preventing specific account takeover attacks, but more general phishing attacks like ransomware campaigns, of course, are not mitigated by multi-factor authentication.
Sure.
But my whole thing is like, so my whole thing is, hold on, wait. Like ransomware attacks, how does a longer, essentially longer password prevent against ransomware attacks versus multi-factor? Like,
it doesn't.
The two are mutually exclusive. A longer password doesn't protect you any better than multi-factor, or it doesn't protect you any better than having a longer password in multi-factor authentication, whether we're talking about domain or authentication to a service.
No amount of two-factor authentication will prevent you from being stupid. And I will attest to this. That recent VLC thing that came out with it will grab all of your stuff from all of your browser cache, and if you install this version of VLC via an update, it will do all these things. And sure enough, I installed the bad version of the VLC mirror, and it needed authenticated rights to install, and I gave it to it, and sure enough, it gave it rights to it and read all these things, which was a brand new system, so it had none of these things.
Most of the ransomware out there, like, let's face facts.
Two-factor authentication would have fixed that.
No.
It would have asked me for my 2FA.
But you're already freaking authenticated once you execute the payload that installs the ransomware.
Or if it's asking you to authenticate, you're likely going to authenticate because
I think that's a poor example in the article. I agree that it was used badly, bad context, whatever you want to call it, just doesn't work. So,
we all
just
go ahead,
digress and point out a pet peeve real quick.
Yes, sir.
So what drives a lot of the industry is PCI. Can't go an episode without bringing up PCI. The requirement for years for PCI in terms of password complexity was often met and satisfied by my PCI customers by implementing the Microsoft password complexity rules, which
you could only implement 3 out of 4.
Do not meet the PCI requirements, and still to this day do not.
Yep. Because you can only do 3 out of 4, you can't do 4 out of 4.
The dude that came up with, you must have an 8-character password that is uppercase, lowercase, special characters.
We talked about this guy a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
We did.
He came out and said, I
fucked up.
I fucked up. Like, that's wrong.
Yep. The site, so because of this VLC thing, I got nailed by. I went, and even though I didn't need to, I went and changed everything. And as part of the things that I found out, that many sites, when I put my 42-character password, all lowercase, all plain text, no special characters, no numbers, there were a number of places where I attempted to use that password that said, you don't have a number or a special character. Fuck. Dude, my password is 42 characters long.
It's
I
what's,
rest my case.
It's
That's
what's
getting
wrong
into
with the
crypto.
world today in terms of authentication. I covered a story on Hacknick and News this week that called out a number of major online providers like Uber and others. That basically, it was self-serving to the organization that provided authentication and access, right? But they found that like some of the top major providers, like I want to say it was Uber and goes to Hacknick News, but like the major providers that you would like authenticate to today, like still required that you have a number, like you're saying, Larry.
I mean, Mike, I'm
like
happy
your
to.
maximum password length can only be 10 characters, and it has to contain an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a special character.
And you know what?
Like,
and you know what?
hold on, wait. My password
I have a login to this day, Paul, that I set on I travel a lot, so I won't say what kind of company it is, but my login is a 4-digit PIN, and it has been for probably 15 years.
And a 4-digit PIN is fine as like a second factor. We go back to GM.
That's not a second factor. That's
one
my
factor.
login.
Yeah. Now, what's
my
interesting is
password.
we go back to GM. We talk about car hacking. Bring this full circle before we round out. You have to have a login, username, and password to log in order to like do anything in the app. Like when I had to unlock my car at the beach yesterday, had to put my 4-digit PIN in.
Good.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
But after multiple steps, it wasn't the first. It wasn't the
first step.
Yep.
I just don't.
This is to a something that is involved with travel, where I log in and make reservations for something
like OpenTable or Uber or Lyft.
Is my account number, and my password is a 4-digit PIN. I've never had to change it, and 4-digit PIN was acceptable. It's been that way for 15 years.
I am so using Jeff's travel rewards to go book some hotel rooms.
It's just bad. Anyway,
let's put it this way. I broke out one of the vintage shirts today. Do it.
I just can't get over authentication. I really can't. Michael Santocangelo, when he came on the show, he just started up Security Weekly with us.
Santa?
He kept pointing out a lot
when is he going to come back on this show? Soon.
Maybe when we figure it out.
No,
or started to figure it out.
Soon.
Because we need to figure. Why? Like you need my financial organization. Oh, you need to have an 8-character password. It needs to have uppercase, lowercase, and a special character. Really? I've got a 24-character password. That would be, or passphrase rather.
Yep.
That would be awesome for you. Yeah, they're like, no, we can't accept that. I'm like, hold on. You mean to tell me the difference between 8 and 24 is like something like storage-wise or hash-wise?
Yeah.
Like you can't afford in your data, but like you're a multi-billion-dollar company. You can't afford to store my password.
Oh, they can, but the rules say.
The rules say.
Yeah, because the rules. And that guy admitted he fucked up.
That's a good note to end on.
Yep.
Hey, I've got a really stupid question. In the early days, Unix passwords, you can make them as long as you want, but they only looked at the first 8 characters. Has that ever been changed in Linux?
In Linux, it has.
Yes.
In Windows,
Unix?
it has, except if you're still accepting LM hashes.
Yeah. Oh.
Which.
If
Jeff, that's like a whole segment in and of itself.
Yeah, if you're doing that, you should shoot your management in the face right now. No, not really. Just with a Nerf gun, because that would,
Refer to my presentation, Jeff, how to defend against penetration testers and win. I go through that, like why you would need to do those in a Windows environment.
Yep.
In a Linux environment, I think we're pretty good. Modern Linux, we're pretty good, right?
Yep.
From Joff, do you agree there?
Yeah, I do agree. Modern Linux pretty good, especially not only in the length issue, but in the different ciphers that are implemented on the back end as well. Really pretty
Although
good.
in Linux, if you're root, you can pretty much set whatever password you want.
Well, of course you can. I mean, there's no There's no operating system that's going to prevent you from being an idiot. I mean,
And nobody ever logs in as root and does their day-to-day activities.
with Telnet.
Oh God. Oh God. At least we're moving past that
Oh God.
for the most
There's
part.
just so many, so many analogies.
No, there isn't.
Time to wrap up.
Time to wrap up.
Dude, I'm designing CTF. No, there's so many.
Like next week, you know what? Listen to Paul's Security Weekly and all of the other shows on the Security Weekly network to talk about issues such as this, because we've just flat out run out of time. So thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Over and Bukkake.
Oh yeah.
ASL for Bukkake. Come on now.